I believe we are live. All right.
Yay.
Yay. Exactly. All right. Joining me today, as usual, an extra special guest, Sam Coleman. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do for those who might not know you?
Thanks for having me, Richard. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. I'm a philosopher of mind and cog sci, I would say, but I'm interested in a lot of other stuff as well, from like God through perception, through all kinds of other stuff, ancient philosophy, some ethicsy stuff I'm working on, like antinatalism.
Hmm.
But yeah, mainly philosophy of mind and consciousness. And, I was brought up on can physicalism solve the mind body problem, the knowledge argument, zombies argument, all that stuff. And I got into panpsychism after I got run over during my PhD. I got a bump on the head and became a panpsychist briefly. Correlation, not causation, I don't know. And I've been at University of Hertfordshire since 2007. But from January, I'll actually be moving to University of London, Birkbeck College. And yeah,
I
that's
didn't know
that's it
that.
pretty much.
Congratulations, Birkbeck. That's
Thanks.
awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah, cool. All right. So, and I guess, yeah, right. I knew some of that other stuff you were saying, but I guess I didn't realize about the antinatalism stuff that you were
Yeah.
working on. So that's interesting. I might come back, circle around if you don't mind, um,
Sure.
because I am curious about those kinds of things. But interesting. Okay. So I know your work, Sam, mostly from defending pan-qualityism as a kind of middle ground in between Russellian, well, I guess physicalism, Russellian physicalism, and maybe dualism or
hmm
something like that, or panpsychism.
hmm
So maybe this is where you ended up after you reformed, after got hit on that non-causal bump on the head. But I wonder, it says, do you see this kind of defense of unconscious qualities and the larger view about qualities as somehow being like one of the uniting features of your work?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So I did think I was a panpsychist when I wrote my PhD thesis, but I kept talking about unexperienced experiences. I kept trying to argue that there would be like an instance of there could be conceivably
Hmm.
an experience of blue in some location without a subject attached to it, because I was worrying about the subject combination problem for panpsychism.
Hmm.
And then I think it was Dave Chalmers got me at a conference. It might have been in Budapest. And he said, you're not really a panpsychist. And I was like, I am. And it took me a couple of years to realize he was right, because this talk of experiences without subjects didn't make sense, really. So what I meant was, I mean, I've sometimes talked about mental qualities without consciousness, which sounds very much like the kind of thing David Rosenthal talks about, and you also talk about.
Hmm.
I now, I come and go on this, but at the moment, I like to talk about unexperienced qualia. Well, I can tell you why, but which sounds a bit funny, but yeah, yeah. So that's definitely a uniting theme. And then I have the feeling from studying and working on the problem of consciousness that the real problem there, the real explanatory gap is qualities are not subjective consciousness or awareness as such.
Hmm.
And quite like Mary, right? Mary Jackson's Mary, I mean, she's trying to work out what it's like to see red. Red's the mysterious thing, it's a quality. She already knows what it's like to be conscious. She's not trying to work out what it's like to be conscious because she is conscious.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I think that's where the real problem is. And I came to the conclusion that qualities are irreducible. So if you put those things together, you get a kind of Russellian monism about qualities. But since I think they can be unconscious, it kind of fits in quite neatly. It's not panpsychist. It's a bit more weird than physicalism. So it's somewhere between Russellian physicalism and panpsychism, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Um, about that point about Mary, I know that's kind of not exactly the main point that you were just making, but just as it went
Sure.
by, I was thinking, um, yeah, why isn't there more attention paid to the question of whether Mary, like, does she know about the heart problem just based on her other kinds of conscious experience? Like maybe her frustration about not knowing what red is like to see or something, because she is having all sorts of other conscious experiences. And so the key puzzle, as you're pointing out, isn't like consciousness, but like what that particular quality is like. But and this is going to be something I'm going to be trying to like maybe pry apart in our discussion here, is whether you can make that pry apart, or whether there's a bit of a smuggling in of the consciousness bit with the quality bit in the way that you're thinking about it.
Me particularly,
Yeah, you
not you.
especially. No, not you. No,
Because you talk about,
no, but I
because
mean,
you talk,
people
yeah,
that are interested in
right.
panqualityism,
Us.
basically.
Okay, so
Yeah.
okay, so something about pan qualitism as opposed to people who talk about, I don't know, unconscious qualitative character as such, which you do and David Rosenthal does.
Yeah, well, so
Okay.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't, I wrote about this in my book recently, so I was trying to sort through all this stuff and try to
Okay.
get really clear about it. And I know, and I like your your Q hot,
Oh yeah.
quotational hot view, and maybe we'll get to that down the road because it's related to all this kind of stuff. Um, but I do really wonder, like, what are we talking about when we're talking about unconscious qualities? And so on your view, like the way I'm trying to understand it is that an unconscious quality is exactly the same as it would be when it's conscious, but just without the consciousness bit. Is that
Could
a
be.
fair
It
way
doesn't have
of?
to be. Yes.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Could be. I don't want to take a really hard line on that. It's not that them being brought to consciousness couldn't make any difference because after all, it looks like unconscious perception is involves weaker neural signals, right? So there's some change,
Right. I
but
see.
I don't think it has to be. And oftentimes we want cases where the unconscious state, sensory state or perceptual state plays the same functional role pretty much.
Right.
So that suggests to me that it's the same property involved.
Exactly.
I'm thinking of like unconscious mental imagery or, I mean, like, I don't know if you read this paper I wrote about restless leg syndrome, but
I
the
did
quale
actually. Yeah.
involved, yeah, cool. So that's what I mean. It seems like the causal profile needs to be pretty much the same. So that suggests to me, so yeah, it can be the same quality. And yes, it's just that thing without consciousness, yes.
Right.
And whatever functions come with consciousness, which there are functions that come with that. So yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Now, so I mean, my own view is like I'm kind of against qualities, I guess, and I'm more of a representationalist of like the kind of, anti-quality kind. So I do wonder, like, what is the reason for positing mental qualities at all? Because I do understand that we're talking about properties that play a role in the mind and such. And it seems like representations can play that role, and
Yes.
those could be the common elements, and that could explain the seemings. And of course, representationalism is a strong alternative view, but I just wonder, like, why invest so heavily in qualities, mental qualities, that is to say, before we even get to pan qualities.
Explain to me where we disagree because I believe in mental representations. I believe in neural representations. It's just that, I mean, when I think about representation, I think about, I don't know, pictorial representation or I guess, uh, sentences or something. But I think about there being qualities in virtue of which the sentence or the picture or the representation represents. I mean, if you so I've never quite known what people meant when they say they're a representationalist, other than talking about some correlations between brains, some more or less sophisticated ones between brain states and stuff in the environment. So I'm not anti-representations. It's just I maybe disagree about what it takes for a representation, what it's made of, if you like, or what it's got built into it. So
Hmm.
I'm not sure wherein we disagree, except that I think probably the main thing is I think the qualities are irreducible. So
Well,
is that the bit you're probing? Because
no,
I'm not.
I'm just wondering what they are, because I mean, a quality is as their so for I mean, you could have the definition go many ways. So on the Rosenthal style thing,
Yeah,
they're simply defined in relation to all the other qualities in a way, which are
yeah,
defined in terms in relation to the stimulus, which produced those
yeah,
qualities. And so they're all relationally defined. But that's almost like you have to really beat people over the head with that to get them to sort of see what's going on, because everyone else thinks of a quality as a kind of intrinsic thing,
yeah,
which is the way it is unrelationally by itself or something like that, apart from everything else, or somehow by its nature. It's hard to specify what they mean, but they mean
yeah,
not like that thing that we just said, this the
yeah,
relational
yeah,
thing. So like I'm not sure, like when you talk about a mental quality and then you invoke
yeah,
people like Rosenthal who has that picture
yeah,
in mind, but that's
yeah.
not the picture you have in mind, I don't think,
No, it
right?
is.
So So it is okay. So yes, let's hear this. Go ahead, please.
Well, that is to say, I don't think that they have to be intrinsic in the sense of being self-standing or atomistic. I don't
Okay.
believe in that. I'm quite persuaded that they sit in a quality space
Okay.
and that they're relational. But that
Okay.
doesn't mean they're reducible to those relations, which I think is where I differ with David. He thinks that once you've set out the quality space structure for color or something, the colors just fall out. Whereas I
Hmm.
think it's kind of vice versa. The colors fix the quality space, but they are relationally, they're interdefined for sure. Okay, so I mean, Uriah Kriegel's got this useful way of picking out awareness versus qualities, right? Awareness or consciousness, if you like, is what all conscious mental states or all experiences got in common, and the qualities is wherein they differ.
Yes.
So tasting lemon is different from tasting coffee, is different from tasting chocolate. Seeing blue is different from seeing green, from seeing red, but blue and green are more similar, so they resemble. So the qualities are picked out by their role in how we compare and experiences and say that they resemble or differ. Is that of any help? Plus,
I
they're
mean, I
the
guess it
they're the
would it
body.
wouldn't be because Kriegel's a representationalist who doesn't think there are mental qualities in this way, and so the things that he's talking about are like what he calls mental schmalities, or like the represented objects, the intentional objects of the kind of representations he's talking about. But they are, and if that's what you mean by a mental quality, that we have states that represent that there are these things or something, and maybe those things are in the environment, like the property of a tomato or a tree or something. That's old school representationalism. Is that there are no mental qualities? They're just we represent that there are
I
no
think Krieger's
actual
got schmolly.
qualities in the mind. But so,
Right.
but
Okay.
you're insisting that like in addition to all these things that we're talking about, there is this thing that is the quality that somehow is like
Yeah. Yeah. Good.
and that's what I'm trying to understand is like on your view, like what is that thing?
So there are two issues to clear up, and I don't know if clearing them up will solve the overall puzzle, but let's see. So
Okay.
the first is where they are. So I mean, I do think they're in the head, but that's in a way orthogonal. I mean, you could be a pan-qualityist and think that the qualities you're immediately aware of, color qualities, say, are distal qualities of distal stimuli. That's no problem. I think maybe Brian Cutter has a view like that.
Mm,
Bertrand Russell certainly seemed to have a view like that at one point.
right.
So that's orthogonal to whether there are qualities and whether they're irreducible, seems to me where they are. So I happen to think they're in the head, and we can talk about that if you like.
Yeah.
I know that people find that
Well, why wouldn't
incredible.
they be in the
I find
leg?
the other view incredible.
Like there,
Sorry?
it seems like they'd be in the leg at least sometimes, right?
In the leg.
Yeah, for restless leg.
Well, I don't think so. I think they present as being in the leg, but I think that the fact that you can chop, yeah, you've got the
So they
homunculus
might
and stuff like that.
present as being qualitative too. So
I
once you go
don't
that
think,
far, then I wonder why you want to not go all the way.
yeah, yeah. I don't think you can get rid of qualities. I don't think you can present as qualitative without being qualitative. I think the attempt to do that is a bit like trying to paint the Mona Lisa with a pencil and paper. It's like you're not going to be able to generate the colors out of that. It's just the palette, the resources are too thin. Um, the other issue is the reducibility. Yeah, so this is what we're talking about.
Hmm.
It seems to me that's it. So I mean, when I say qualities are, in a quality space, like Rosenthal says, when I say you can pick them out as the resembling or differing properties, the what it's like properties, those are they're not. I'm not defining the whole essence of them, but those are ways of picking them out that I can call on that other people agree. We're now pointing to a certain phenomenon, and now they may think that those things, in addition, are reducible to certain kinds of representation or relationship or something. I don't think that. So that's where we disagree. I think they're irreducible. So I guess I reify them into their own sort of thing and call them qualities. But I don't see that means that you don't know that you have to fail to know what I'm talking about. I think we're talking about the same things. Like I see the redness on your shirt. It's like you've got like, is it giraffe part?
A giraffic part.
Very, very nice, giraffe part. So, of that redness, we can ask, where is it? Is it in the world? Is it in our heads? And then what gets it to exist? Is it its own thing? Bishop Butler says everything is itself and not something else. I'm quite like that quote.
Yes.
Or is it analyzable into representational contents on some theory of representation? You might say yes, I would say no, but I would have thought we could agree that we were talking about the same thing. I mean, compare.
But how
Someone might
about
say,
we?
oh,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
if we get if we get a pre-Socratic in the room and we say, we're talking about water. What do you think about water? And they say, well, we think it's an element. And we say, no, 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 it's reducible to H2O. I don't think it would be fair to then say, what are you talking about when you say water? It's like, we're talking about the same thing. We disagree about its reducibility. So do you know what I'm talking about now or not?
Well, I know what red is, if
Yeah.
that's what you mean. Yes, but I don't know what a quality is, which could be unconscious and just like that. If you don't simply mean it could be related to a bunch of other things in some way, which is what the Rosenthalian picture is, which has nothing to do with consciousness, and what you know because not you, but one knows. I mean, because he's very clear that you can do this quality space stuff with an unconscious a creature that's like not consciously experiencing the colors. That they
Yes.
could be totally unconscious, and you could still, because they're not differentiated on his view by some phenomenology introspective thing. They're differentiated by discriminatory abilities, just notable differences, blah blah blah, all that complicated story. And so those things, whatever he's talking about that he calls mental qualities, cannot be the same thing that you're talking about. That seems to me to be like not even that can't be right. That's definitely not right. Because those things
Um,
that he's talking about are just relational things that are not in any way related to consciousness at all. Zero relation to consciousness.
well, aren't they the properties that, if accurately higher order represented, inform the character, the what it's likeness character of consciousness that make an experience of pain different from an experience as of an itch and so on? Well, I
No,
agree with
no,
that.
no, not on Rosenthal's view. No.
So how not? Sorry, if I'm in a certain first order state and it's accurately higher order represented, then as an itch and not not as a pain, say, then what I experience is itchiness, right? That's a view of his.
If you represent it as an itch, you experience itchiness.
Yeah, I mean okay, so one difference with his view is all of the stream of consciousness power is in the higher order thought, what it says, and I don't agree with that.
Right, and that's
So
because the
yeah, in a
core.
way, his qualities never make it into consciousness, which is like a
Exactly.
thing I
Yes.
complained about. Yeah, okay, so there's that difference. Yeah, okay, so
And that's kind of
but
what
I
I'm
mean,
complaining about is how do you take inspiration from that kind of view, which doesn't ever make any of it into consciousness, and then you're saying, oh, I like that kind of view, but no, it's not actually. It's another view that has a different thing that
well,
you're using the same word for, quality. But it's not, it can't be the same thing that shows up in that kind of theory, which is why I'm trying to figure out like what is it that you're talking about. It seems like what you're talking about is red as it appears to me without appearing to me. And that
yes.
and that doesn't track onto like the way I would understand like unconscious quality from quality space theory. It's
Well, we
not
do
red as it
disagree.
appears to me.
Sorry.
That just is there. Sorry, you go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, no, it's fine, it's fine. Well, I mean, I suppose it's a question of how much inspiration I take from Rosenthal's view. So I certainly don't agree with that part. Mind
Yeah.
you, when I've said to him, I don't think your first order qualities make it into consciousness, he will say, well, what else can there be to quote making it into consciousness than being mentally represented? And I've said, yeah, but it feels like if since I can have an empty higher order thought, it doesn't matter if they're there or not, they kind of get screened off. But he doesn't have any time for that. So I don't think he would accept that they don't make it into consciousness, or rather, he might just dismiss that notion. I mean, obviously, I want to collapse the first order and the higher order states so that the very object gets into consciousness somehow, whatever that means.
Yeah.
But the bit of his view I take inspiration from is, well, I mean, the bit we were talking about earlier is the idea that the qualities might be relationally constituted. And I don't think there's any reason why I can't say that. It's just that, I mean, it's quite clear that part of what it is to be red is to be closer to orange than to blue. I don't see why I can't say things like that.
You can say things. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And by the way, I'm not saying you should be Rosenthal. You be yourself. There's
Yeah.
enough Rosenthals. But so that what I was saying was that I understand his view. But then when
Yeah.
you say I'm trying to like adopt a view like that, I don't understand what you're saying because you're saying things that sound similar to the view that I understand. but which actually are very different and not the
Yeah.
same really. And so then I go, well, what are we talking about? This thing that's like you're using the same word for it, but seems so different. You're going, no, it's just redness. And I'm going, wait, but what? No, that can't be what we're talking about. Because part of the story for me is that like Rosenthal has this whole diagnosis of a problem called the relocation story, which he thinks, we start off with the red out there on the tomato, and then we relocate that property into the mind. But the property that we relocated is the redness as I consciously experienced it. And then we get all confused about, what is this thing? But really what we should have done is been like, oh, there's a property out there, and then there's a property in here that we're aware of it, and then there's our conscious experience, and separate those out. Then we get a kind of, you get worked into a Rosenthalian picture, which I'm not a big fan of, but still, it's a story you can tell, and it kind of makes sense. But it starts with the diagnosis of this mistake, which is don't move the property as it appears to you just straight into the mind. And it kind of seems like that's what you are doing. And I'm not saying that that's where you're making a mistake, but I'm going like, yeah, isn't that like this relocation story thing, which we were warned about? And in a way, yeah, that's what leads you to the idea that they're irreducible, or that they can't be like understood in the normal way.
Well, no, I don't think so, because the consciousness part, I don't have such a problem with reducing. It's the qualitative, what it's like part that I have trouble with reducing. So I've always been puzzled by his claim that, yeah, it's thinking of them as conscious that makes it hard to reduce them. And if you just think of them as potentially unconscious, then that gets rid of the problem. Because since consciousness for me is an extrinsic relation, I don't see why taking that away or putting it in should make a difference to whether the property that stands in that relation is reducible or not. So I've never understood that idea. Let me give you an analogy that may or may not help. So there's a certain kind of direct realist or naive realist who would say, like, the color of the redness on your shirt, the redness that I experience in visually perceiving your shirt is on the shirt. The shirt itself contributes the redness to my experience. My experience somehow wraps around you and the shirt when I see it. So that in a way, the red quale is on your shirt. Now, does that redness disappear when I close my eyes or turn away or you turn around? I mean, on the face of it, no, at least you don't have to say that. There are some direct realists who say that the redness persists. So if the redness is the quale and it's independent of my experience of it, that seems to me to give you a way of understanding an unexperienced quality in my sense. And especially if you then, there's a further debate, is that quality reducible to merely physical property, or is it irreducible? So you can get a picture structurally like mine, but with the quality on the facing surface of your t-shirt. It's just that I disagree about where the quality is.
Yeah,
But
but I have the
yeah,
same
so
problems with naive realism or direct realism. I don't really understand the view that they're making either. The claim that they're making, because I don't understand what it would be like to have red just like it is that I'm experiencing right now when no one's experiencing. I kind of almost think it's conceptually not coherent to say that.
people say that. It's
Yeah.
really strange because you think, sorry,
No,
no,
go
go
ahead.
on.
I want to hear what you have to say. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, isn't consciousness a form of knowledge? I mean, isn't it part of how I know what your shirt is like is by visual consciousness of it? Isn't that right? Don't we agree with that? I mean, even if we don't buy into like full heavy duty acquaintance, we say consciousness is a way of knowing. I mean, it's a way of knowing about our state of our mind or the state of the world. Okay, well, I mean, we very standardly say that the objects of knowledge are independent from the modes of knowing of them. And if I know about mental qualities, be they on distal stimuli or in my head via consciousness, you might have thought, you might have expected from quite a standard epistemology metaphysics distinction that I could take the mode of knowledge away and leave the object intact. In which case, there you've got the idea of the quality. I mean, it's strange to me that people might think that our way of knowing about them is somehow built into the properties themselves. And it's even stranger for you because I thought you thought that consciousness was an extrinsic relation. So,
I don't
and
think that.
Rosenthal,
No, no, no.
you know, because you've got the, oh, sorry, because you've got the, yeah, the horror views.
Yeah.
So no, maybe tell me what you think, and then I think I know, but I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, I am very confused by this whole issue, which is why I wanted to talk to you about it. But it seems to me like I can almost make sense of what you're saying. It's like, okay, I look over here,
Oh,
there's red, and then I look away and I'm like, is the red still there? And then I'm
yeah,
thinking to myself, what does that mean though? And to me, I can't
yeah.
think my way out of saying, well, it means if I look over there, I'll see red. That's all that it means. There's nothing really more than that. And what else is there to saying it's red? Oh, there's a physical property. Okay. There's light. Yes. There's a brain. Okay, wonderful. But where's the red in all of that? And in fact, this picture, the kind of argument from Chalmers that we start off with this Edenic picture of phenomenology, but
Yeah.
then we're led by illusions and science to kind of go, well, the world ain't like that. And it's like, so where along that route do you resist because I think that's a very convincing argument against like the world can't be like that for these at least two reasons.
Well, I don't think the world's like that. I think and for those very reasons, illusions and so on. That's pretty much why I put qualities in the head. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, then you're actually making me think that I'm right to say qualia because at least people will, however much they struggle to understand what I'm saying, will be in the right ballpark. I
Yeah.
mean, that very property. So when you say okay, I look away. The only sense I can make of it being still being read is this kind of dispositional idea that if I were to look back, I would experience red. But
Yeah.
if I say it's like that, your t-shirt, it's like that. It's not like my blue cardigan. Does it remain like that when I look away? I would say yes. So that's a description of a current property, not merely a disposition to cause a certain experience in me. Does
Yeah.
that I mean, you may think that. So one thing is, do you understand what I'm saying? Another thing is, do you think that it makes sense or is true? So have I gotten you to understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. I
Or
mean, I know what you want to try to say. I just don't
okay,
understand how it could be true. Like, I
yeah.
don't get it. So it doesn't
So
like it seems to me like if the redness is the way it is when I'm experiencing it now,
yeah,
even when I'm not experiencing it,
yeah,
then we're dealing with a very consciousness. That's how is that not? So you want to say it's pan proto, you want to say it's a pan quality, but
yeah.
it's just consciousness. It's redness. And you can say, no, I use the word consciousness for when you're aware of that thing. And I say, you can say that, I guess, but like, how do you get away with saying that redness as I experience it, if it really is as I experience it, then it's an experience. Like what, how do you get out of that? I
Strange.
don't understand how you get out of that.
Because why are you mixing my awareness into the redness? What's my awareness got to do with what the redness is like?
Because you're saying the redness is as it is now.
As it appears.
Yeah.
But things that appear can preserve their properties when they're not appearing. I mean, do you say the same thing about shape? I mean, here's the shape of my phone. Do
Uh-huh.
you say that the shape of my phone, as experienced, can't possibly exist when I take the phone away? I mean,
Yes,
presumably
of
not.
course.
Or
Yeah.
really?
Well, what do you mean? As you experience it? Yes. There's atoms out there. They aren't like that.
But sorry. Okay, but well,
You think there's atoms arranged in a rectangle in your room right now? That seems so weird. That's not what
why?
quantum mechanics says. That's what
Well, something rectangular on some level.
no, once
Well,
you get to maybe
surely.
some decoherence, you can kind of mathematically pull out something that looks like that. But what you get is a swarm of electrons and fields and fluctuations. And yeah, I mean, that's got to be the way the physical world actually is. And so, what would it mean to say that there's a square independent of your experience of it? Um, is a question that I don't really understand. Yeah, it doesn't really make sense
But
to
do you
me.
believe in squares?
Of course, yeah.
But if the squares aren't out there, they must be in here. So
They
you're
are out there.
essentially
They're just
things.
out there in a way that's different from how I experience them, which seems obvious. The way they
So I've no idea
are,
what a square is.
what?
So I've no idea what a square is
Yeah,
from
in
visually
a
speaking.
ontological sense, I guess I would say that that's kind of true. That's kind of why you guys can insert whatever you want into the base level of reality, equality, consciousness, panpsychism, panqualitism, whatever. Because really, in some sense, we don't know what the intrinsic, or even if there is an intrinsic nature of reality. So
Sorry,
if squareness has something to do with that, yeah, there's an intrinsic nature of reality. I don't think we really know about it.
so we've no idea what squares are from visual experience or so geometers who use diagrams of squares are what are they doing exactly? Or
Approximating
who
equations.
no, but they often use diagrams but you'd say that the diagram bears no relation to a real square or
It
only correlates to.
approximates the mathematical relations of an equation, of the equations for the shape. for the figure.
I'm very puzzled. I mean, this sounds like the kind of thing Berkeley was complaining about when he said like the Lockean view puts like the properties that we talk about way beyond our ability to access them or know anything about them, make them entirely mysterious. I'm getting that vibe from you. So I guess I just don't see a reason to go that way.
Well, the way to
To say
go
that
is the way to say that the world outside of experiences as mathematical physics dictates, and the way we experience the world is as phenomenology dictates, and they don't comport. They are different. So therefore, there is a puzzle here. But it just seems like to say the world is as it is right now when I experience it is like, I guess I'm too much of a Kantian. It's just like what is it you're talking about? This like external world that exists independent of us being aware of it. If it's not simply that which is described mathematically, and quantum mechanics doesn't make any intuitive sense. We can't really picture how it is in any intuitive
but
sense,
but
and that makes sense given what I'm saying.
but quantum's got to knit up with the macro level somehow. I mean, Schrödinger makes a big deal of that, Einstein as well. So it's
Yeah.
you know it's not like you can just eliminate the macro world or the macro world as it appears. They've got the two things have got to knit up, haven't they, at some point? It
Um,
sounds like you want to eliminate
no, I'm kind of this is
all.
kind of a structuralism. So that it's what these properties really are, maybe kind of structural properties, um, but the way they can be experienced and the way that we're experiencing it right now. But like what space is really probably isn't the directly lined up with the way we experience it.
Uh,
That's
I
all
guess
I'm
I
saying, and
find
that's we have lots of
yeah.
evidence that the way we experience the world is seemingly different than the way the world is unexperienced. But and I would say we have lots of reason to believe that. But you're saying no, we should think that the world is exactly as we experience it, in spite of all this evidence, which suggests that the world unexperienced is a very different place without these things that we're talking about, these qualities. They don't really
Bear in
seem to
mind, I'm
play a
not
role
sorry.
in the mathematics of our physics or in the equations that describe neural functioning or whatever, Nernst equations, etc. So yeah, it just if you're like saying how like what picture should you think the world is, how should it be? I would say we should think it's like the way the scientific picture is telling us.
I don't think the scientific picture, as you call it, tells us that the world's any particular way. I think that's kind of for us to reflect upon and come to a view, and that's a philosophical project. I don't think that the physics itself really tells us. And I guess I
And
don't see a reason to. Sorry.
no, but so you don't think that the physics that we have currently suggests that qualities as you're describing them don't play a role? Like there nowhere is there a part in the physical description of the world in which you go, oh, a quality would be useful right there.
They don't sharpen the maths because the maths, but this would just be a standard Russellian monist shtick I'm going to give you now.
Mm-hmm.
The maths describes the equations describe the behaviors of particles, but it doesn't really care what they're made of. But if you think that the dispositions and the relations that are described by those equations have to have what people call a categorical basis or an intrinsic basis, I don't really like those terms, but there needs to be more, I don't know, more to a particle, say, than what it does, then there's room for some other kind of nature, or at least for those dispositions to be grounded in something, and that could be a quality or a bit of consciousness, or it could be a mysterious physical categorical property like Barbara Montero and I think Daniel Stoljar, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So I that's not a bit of science reasoning, that's a bit of metaphysical reasoning, but I find that quite persuasive.
Yeah, but that's
Um,
what I'm questioning is like that metaphysical reasoning in light of the scientific discoveries looks very suspect. And
why?
why? Because we don't need it.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
completely ad hoc, unnecessary postulation.
so you don't think dispositions have to be grounded, you don't think relations need relata,
I like
you think
ontic
it can be
structural
just
realism. It's yeah,
yeah,
I'm
okay,
cool with
okay.
it.
Okay. Okay.
So I
Yeah,
mean,
I
I don't
mean,
see that seems less contradictory than these qualities that exist as I experience them without experience. That sounds like less contradictory to me, even though it still sounds very strange that there's like all these dispositions with no basis.
Yeah,
So that does
that
sound a
does
bit
sound
weird.
strange to you.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
But both these things are very strange to me. It's like which one's
Yeah.
stranger?
Yeah, yeah, okay.
So
That's okay.
consciousness
I
without
don't mind.
consciousness just sounds like straight up contradiction.
I didn't say
But
that.
that is what it amounts to, is what I'm arguing, is
No,
that is
not at
what you're
all.
saying, is that you just don't want to put it that way. But that what else could you mean except consciousness without awareness, which is like the view that you want to put on Wayne and say, that's what his view about the dorsal stream or whatever. And, the overflow hypothesis that you want to defend isn't like that. You say it's just the qualities that overflow without the awareness of them. But I just, what I'm kind of trying to, I guess, push is I just don't see the difference between the two views. It
Yeah.
just looks like you go, I don't want to call them conscious, by which I mean I'm not aware of them. And then Ned Block would be like, yeah, great, but they're still phenomenally conscious. And I don't see where you get to say, no, they aren't.
Normally, conscious means I feel them. It means they're part of my stream of consciousness. They're part of what it's like to be me.
Yeah. And you just don't know
So
about them.
I can't make sense of that without my registering them in some way. But I can make sense of my behaving as if I'm in pain, giving us reason to ascribe a pain to me, but my not feeling that pain. So I'm not going to use the term awareness. And if the behavior is just that behavior which I would have, or pretty much where I to feel the pain, then that's a reason to ascribe that very same property to me without the extrinsic relation of my awareness. So there's an argument, and that's the kind of argument I mount for the restless leg syndrome case.
Exactly. And
And
that's what I was trying to push back on that argument, was by saying that the property that's in common is a representational property that has
sure,
no quality. And then when the extrinsic awareness comes around, therein
it
lies your
paints it.
representation of a quality showing up all of
It
a
paints
sudden,
it.
but it wasn't there before.
So that's what makes the quality epiphenomenal. What you're saying is that the hurtfulness of pain, the painfulness of pain is epiphenomenal because the behavior is explained by the non-qualitative property that I can have in common in the conscious and unconscious cases. That's exactly the dialectic I'm complaining about in the restless leg syndrome paper, because it that would make the quality epiphenomenal. But to say that qualities are epiphenomenal seems to me, that really does seem to me a contradiction. Well,
Well,
contradiction
I'm
too
saying there
strong,
are
but
no qualities. There's only the thing which is controlling the leg,
okay,
and then your
okay.
representation of it as a quality.
Yeah,
But there
okay,
are no
that's good. That's
qualities.
nice
So
and clear.
saying that they're yeah, if a non-existent
They're
thing,
less than
yeah,
epiphenomenal. They don't
exactly.
even exist. Okay, I mean, I'm glad you said that because that makes it nice and clear. And I had like this feeling of eliminativism. I guess when you say that, like swirling around, I guess when you say that, it's like I'm happy to get off the bus now because that's something I could never accept. For me, there's nothing more obvious. There's nothing that's more clearly a datum than that. I don't know. So, once I had pneumonia after Christmas,
Oh, you just got censored. Oh, Sam, hold on. You cut out.
incredible pain.
Oh, sorry, you,
Sorry?
you cut out. I missed it.
Oh, oh,
No, you're
sorry.
back now though. You had pneumonia and then you
Okay.
cut out. I don't know what happened after that.
Oh God. When I was about 12, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So I think my connection's okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Just
keep me posted about that. I was about 12. Yeah. So we had reheated Christmas dinner a few days later, maybe like too many days later. And I started to get this terrible pain. And I first of all thought it was it's like stomach pain or food poisoning. But then it became like someone was I don't know if you've ever had pneumonia. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But like someone was sticking a burning needle into my lungs. And so my dad luckily whisked me to hospital. And when I don't know if you go into the emergency room in England, there's usually somebody screaming. Well, on this occasion, that guy was me. I was the screamer. And I remember, because I was into philosophy even at that time, and I was thinking, wow, I'm really impressed by the way that I cannot help but scream given this pain. Like I just cannot help but scream. It's making me scream. And I sometimes also notice that when when you're going to cry and you feel like the welling up of the feeling, and then the tears start coming. I'm very impressed by these cases where it just seems overwhelmingly that the quale is helping to cause some behavior.
Yeah.
And I can't get rid of that datum, and I can't accept that what's causing it is really a quality-free representational state, and that that it's an illusion to me, this causation. I just don't see any reason to accept that. I can't accept it. So
Well,
given
the
that, I feel
reason
like
to
we have
accept
to.
it is all the reasons that I've been. I mean, I understand that this is. So I agree with you. This is the way it appears. So I'm
Okay.
agreeing phenomenologically
Okay.
that. So
Okay.
there's no
Okay.
doubt that that is the way things appear.
Okay.
The question
Okay.
is whether we have reason to think that the physical world is like that. In particular, is the brain like that? And it just seems to me overwhelmingly the case that the answer is no. It would be nice if it were, but it isn't. So instead, there's all of these other things we discover, which is that these things come apart. There's pain symbolia where people say it's painful but don't care about it. There's blind sight cases where people behave
Mhm.
in certain ways like they're seeing. And so there's all these cases, and you can interpret them 1,000 ways. And you could have
Yeah.
your interpretation, and I could have my interpretation. And that
Yeah.
seems to me to suggest that we don't really know what's going on here. But so we have to pick like which one overall fits with this bigger interpretive project. And a world full of these unreducible intrinsic qualities doesn't fit with like the picture of how the brain works, let
Okay.
alone how the
So
physical world more generally works.
yeah. Okay. So, you're holding up the manifest image and the scientific image, and it seems to me you're kind of, you're just
Yeah.
beating up the manifest image with the. So I hold them up and I go, we've got to fit them together, and I don't really want to shrink this one. I want to shrink it as little as possible. We've got to fit them together. Sellers has this project. And so I take the manifest image extremely seriously. So I take the datum that it seems to me that the qualities are causing my behavior or contributing causally to it or prompting or whatever very, very seriously.
Mhm.
The other thing to say is, so we've got a kind of difference in taste there, I suppose, about maybe our meta-philosophical approach.
Yeah.
I don't see science as being having that privilege of crushing the because otherwise we lose track of what we're even talking about. I can say more about that a bit later. But before I forget, because I'm a bit fuzzy because of my cold,
Yeah, sorry. I
you,
know you're
you,
doing really
you
well. By the way, for someone with a cold, you're trooping it really good.
oh, thanks. I feel like dead. I hope I'm making sense
No,
because I
you
feel
are.
like
You definitely are. No,
I
you
don't
are.
feel as articulate as normal. Yes, so you went very quickly there from, what I'm defending right now is the idea of unconscious qualities given my notion of qualities. And you went very quickly from that to pan-qualitism and you said the world's not like that. The thing I want to hang on to really strongly is the qualities are as they are and they can be unconscious in that form. The pan-qualitism is something I believe, but it's strictly logically independent of that.
Uh-huh.
I mean,
That's
it
good to
needs
know.
those. Okay, it's not completely logically independent. It needs that notion, I think. But you could believe in the unconscious qualities in the way I do without being a pan-qualitist, for sure.
Well, actually, in my book, I argue no, you can't.
Oh,
They
go on.
always
Oh, that's very
suspiciously
interesting.
go together,
Oh,
and every one leads to
huh,
the other. And I sort of
huh.
think that the problem here is of the kind we've been talking about, which is that you're trying to separate something which can't be separated, and then saying you did it, but it wasn't done. That's sort of
And
what
then I
it
and then I
appears to
get the
me is happening.
irreducibility.
Yeah.
Oh, that's I see. Do you criticize me in your book
Oh
directly?
yeah, I got a whole chapter on it.
Oh, great. Which chapter? Oh,
Seven,
that's
chapter
great.
seven.
I know you sent it to me, but I just what with kids at chapter 7. I'm
Yeah,
going to
well,
go
I
and have a
really
look
try
at
to
that.
sort out all the different higher order views, and the
You
quotational
sort
view
me
is an
out. Thank
interesting
you.
one. And I'm not like a true believer in higher order theories. I'm
Yeah.
more interested in the ideas and wonder how you could
Yeah.
falsify them.
Yeah.
And also, in all fairness to Rosenthal, he's been a big influence in leading this like rediscovery of it. But in fairness to the people that came before him, there's a long tradition of higher order theorizing that sort of
Yeah.
does
Yeah.
it in a different way than Rosenthal.
Yeah.
And not that that's good or bad, but it's like people get these confused a lot of times. And Rosenthal's way of doing things is very like Quinean, let's say.
Yes.
And my way of doing things is very like, anti-Quinean, let's say, more
Yeah. Yeah.
Kripke, Grice, Fodor style.
Yeah. Yeah. Photo.
And
Yeah.
that's a
Lots of.
difference in taste for sure, but it doesn't mean that you can't be like a higher order theorist. So I am very keen to like sort out all of these different views and be like, okay, so what does your background view of intentionality actually determine for what a higher order thought looks like? And is my view like that? Like I talk about representations because I don't want to talk about thoughts. I'm not talking about folk psychology. So I do think that
Okay.
there's like a lot of differences, but that are worth like sorting through, but mainly in service of like what empirically would differentiate these views. So
Yeah.
if it's not in service of that, then I kind of go, we could
Okay.
slice things any
Yeah.
which way you want, maybe. But if it doesn't, like, so when I'm looking at the brain and I'm going, okay, so what in the brain would be like a quality of the sort that you're talking about? Because we don't have that. What we have is 86 billion neurons with all kinds of crazy sloppy synapses, chemicals slushing around, electrical activity as a result of that chemical sloshing. And it's like there's nothing quality like in there,
Well,
which could play the
well,
role of the thing that you're talking about. So I just that's what I was kind of trying to say is like, a, we don't have any reason to think the brain is like that, so that mentally we don't have reason to think that there are qualities. But also, we don't have any reason to think the physical world is like that, so that we furthermore don't have any reason to think that they're out there somewhere either. And it sort of seems like the argument from illusion and science kind of just win. And the rest is like wishful thinking in a way, or like it would be nice, but what would differentiate the views? I just don't like your view. You say I'm not a panpsychist. I say you kind of are. You say no, I'm not. I say well, kind of, and then what else is there? Like, is that it? Or how could you solve that? What I'm saying is like what would move the debate?
or we move which debate? The
Well,
debate
this
between
debate about
panpsychism and
whether
consciousness.
their qualities can really exist without consciousness in the way that you're suggesting, because
Yeah.
you're saying it's totally devoid from all empirical refutation, substantiation. It's a purely
Yes.
metaphysical view, and
Well,
therefore
no,
can't be
no.
distinguished from panpsychist views.
I
Or
no, no, no. Sorry, that stuff doesn't follow.
okay, so that's what I'm
Uh,
asking.
so
Yes, exactly.
so I'm pinching my arm right now
Yeah.
because I'm thinking hard,
Okay.
and I feel and I feel to me that the pinch sensation is that's as real as anything gets. So for me, that's a kind of anchor. That's an epistemic anchor. I think Sellers says something like Sellers says, I forget where exactly, but he says, of course there are volumes of pink. Of course there are. That's a fact any theory has to accommodate. The question is where to fit them in the world. So that's what I think. These have to be explained. They can be reduced, maybe identified with neural properties, perhaps.
Yeah,
Though obviously I don't think that works, but not gotten rid of.
I
So
agree with
the
that.
idea that can be eliminated is I don't know. That's what I don't understand.
But Sam, hold on a second though before you get
Sorry.
too ramped up here, because what we're eliminating is this thing called a mental quality, not pain. Pain's real. Pain exists. The claim that pain is a mental quality is a weird theoretical thing that you came up with, and not you, but I mean philosophers, you philosophers of mind, posited that as a theoretical entity, and then the science of the mind says, where are they? And then we go, oh, those theoretical entities probably are sus, but not pains. Pains are in. They're pre-theoretical.
Well, pains, I suppose it depends what you mean by pains. Do pains have what its likeness? Do they have a
Yes.
qualitative character?
Yes.
Well, that's all I mean by a mental quality.
Right. Exactly. But they can't have what its likeness if they're unconscious. What does that mean?
They'd, they'd have what its likeness, but not what its likeness for me. They're not subjectively for me. They still have a character that distinguishes them from an itch or the restless leg syndrome feeling, which I've never felt, but people describe as a kind of itchy, creepy, crawly feeling. But those are qualitatively different. On the face of it, when they're conscious at least, the effects they contribute to are due to the qualitative character. I mean, a pain makes me do different things to an itch, makes me do different things to the restless leg syndrome feeling on account of their qualitative character. So when I do the same sorts of things, but I disavow consciousness of them, it makes sense to say the same properties there. In the way, it makes sense to say when you find something bothering Uranus's orbit in a planet-like way, to say there's something just like a planet there, indeed a planet, let's call it, only unseen by us. So I say qualities are rather like Neptune in that respect. We can pin them at, we can pin them down, we can posit them on the basis of their causal explanatory role. And we've reason to say, if on the assumption that the qualitative character we're aware of when they're conscious, it contributes to their distinctive effects, that very quality is there, that very what it's like, if you want to say that, if that's not too confusing to talk in those terms is there. So does that make sense?
I mean, I want to say yes because
Yeah, come on. I've nearly got Philip Goff on this, you know. He started to talk about unconscious feelings and stuff, and he's like, "Am I a pan-qualityist?" So I can suck you in. Come on.
well, I don't know. Goff's a bit easy on these matters, so no, I don't know. Anyway, so uh,
Yeah,
this is exactly the point, though, right?
come
In
on.
that, in that, well, I got distracted. Let me refocus myself.
Sorry,
By the way,
sorry.
before I refocus myself, I want to, for the viewers out there, Sam has told me that he has a cold, and he mentioned it just briefly. But I am taking advantage of his enfeebled mental state and bashing him about a bit because you would run circles around me normally. So I'm gonna take advantage of your
You must be
of
joking.
your disadvantage. Anyway, no, I appreciate you sticking with this. I know you would probably rather be sleeping or resting, but
No, I'm enjoying it so much.
okay.
You're
Well,
quite
good.
wrong.
I hope, yeah. If you get tired or exhausted, you let me know. But anyway, back to the fray because I do think this is sort of what we've hit upon is to me a very important ambiguity that exists in this literature, which to me wreaks havoc all over the place, and it has to do with qualitative character,
Okay.
specifically that phrase. Okay, so and I love that phrase. Subjective character and qualitative character. I've been using those terms for a long time, and I know that people like Uriah Kriegel use them as well. And I, read him when I was a student, and I was like, yes, finally, someone's using the appropriate terminology. So I think these are good words, but what do they mean is often very tricky when you follow them down all the way. So they can mean at least two things. So one is the one that I would like to introduce them by, and the one that you did as well, I think, which is that subjective character is what all conscious experiences have in common, and qualitative character is what distinguishes them. But now we're talking about phenomenally conscious distinguishing.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Well,
qualitative character in that sense
I
is, well, that this is
you may
what
have
the
begged the
ambiguity is, in my
question.
opinion. So
You may have begged the question
no,
there.
no, I'm setting up a distinction so I don't
Okay,
beg the
sorry.
question. So one way of using the term qualitative character is simply by picking out the way in which conscious experiences differ phenomenologically. So the difference between a red conscious experience and a green conscious experience will involve this thing called the red quality and the green quality, which
Yeah.
we could say is the way in which they differ phenomenologically. From my point of view, I use the term phenomenologically manifest to kind of capture that manifest image Sellers language. So that's what's phenomenologically manifest. So sometimes people use the word qualitative character to mean those phenomenologically manifest differences in conscious experience. Okay.
I mean that.
Yes, but sometimes people use the word qualitative character to mean whatever property first order representational states of the worldly properties out there have, which is not intentional, conceptual, or they give another long list of properties that they hate or don't like or whatever. And it's that thing that we mean mental qualitative character. The qualitative character of red is that thing in the visual system by which the animal behaves appropriately with respect to tomatoes and not lettuce.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that thing might be unconscious. But the first thing
Yes.
cannot be unconscious.
Oh,
So in my way of thinking, the phenomenal, what its likeness, can't be unconscious. That's a contradiction. Consciousness is what its likeness. That's what it is.
what's the
There's no
where's
separating. There's no separating that
well,
out. That's a fool's errand. Consciousness is what it's like. That's what it is. So
what's
this
the argument?
what?
What's the argument?
What's the
I haven't heard an
argument?
argument. Yeah, I haven't heard an argument.
The argument that consciousness is what is phenomenal consciousness is what its likeness.
No, the argument that those very properties can't come apart from consciousness. I mean, you accept that. So, what was it? What was your example? Red tomatoes and so let's take red or
Lettuce.
green. Red and green.
I
Red,
said
lettuce. Right.
tomatoes and
Good.
lettuce.
Good. Yeah. Good. Good. So I'm having an experience, a lettucey greenish experience and a reddish tomatoey experience. by hypothesis, I think we agree they are equal in respect of consciousness or awareness or whatever we want to call it, subjective character. There's a quantity that's so there's a, but that, so wherein they vary is in respect of qualitative character. So that already shows there's something that varies independently of consciousness, qualitative character. Now it's just one little teeny further step to say you can take the consciousness away and leave the qualitative
And
character,
that's
it
where you
seems
beg
to
the
me.
question.
Okay. How have I begged the question? I'm suggesting it. I'm not. Sorry, how have I begged the question?
Because what you've said is that they differ in qualitative character. So we could just take away consciousness and leave that there. But what they
Which is the
differ
thing you
is
want
in
me
an
to show.
experiential aspect of qualitative character. And it's
I
question
don't
begging to
agree.
say you could take away the experiential aspect of experience and still have something that's like the experience. That
I
doesn't,
don't think we're. Sorry.
you go ahead with the not thinking.
I don't think we're. I don't think either of us is begging the question. Let's be kind to ourselves.
Okay, good. I
You're
like that.
saying that you're saying that the qualitative character can't come apart from consciousness, and I'm saying it can, and we're butting heads. I
Well,
don't
what
think
I'm
either of us
saying
is
is that I
begging the
want to
question.
define things in such a way as that question is neutrally set up as to be a question, but the way in which
Yeah.
you're setting things up, it's not neutrally set up as to be a
Oh.
question. It's question beggingly
Oh.
set up in your favor. That's what I'm
No.
saying. Is
No.
I'm trying to set it up in a way that is neutral, so we could say, like, is this the way things are, or do we want? So in my terminology, I'd say, is qualitative character phenomenologically manifest? Is
But I
qualitative
think it
character
is.
something that's in the stream of consciousness? And I
Yes.
say, if it is, then it can't occur out of that in the same
Why?
way. In the same way.
Why?
Because,
No, I just think that my awareness is completely extrinsic to the property in question. And I find that a very congenial picture. It's a picture that various people have had. Feigl, Herbert Feigl, talks about one part of the cortex tapping or scanning another part. I don't think he's talking about the kind of high order theory you have and
yeah,
that I think David Rosenthal has and that Kriegel has, where
exactly.
the all of the quality, all of the what its likeness is in the representing state.
He has more of like
He
a
he means
Hakwan view.
he means like a scat. Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah. So yeah. So on that kind of view, it seems to me it's open that the quality comes in and out of consciousness because consciousness is completely extrinsic to it.
Yeah, I
I
know,
don't.
but
I don't think
what I
I'm.
argue is that that's either nonsense, magic, or like wishful thinking. But it doesn't make. I can't like saying it's like that. If it's really like this when you're not looking at it, then that's consciousness. Like, what do you mean? Like, it
You're.
can't be like that without it being in a conscious mind. Like, what does that
It's
even mean to say it's
strange.
out there,
So
independent
I
of the
look at the
mind?
world.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I keep interrupting you.
No,
It's
I
just because
like
I'm excited.
it.
Okay. Um, It's strange. You know, you sound like I have these arguments with Galen Strawson. He thinks that consciousness is there glowing back from every color, every shape, every surface. I just find that strangely idealistic. I mean, I look at the world, I see color qualities. I think that they are instantiated in my brain, but I don't think consciousness is much to do with them at all. I think that they are presented to me by consciousness, but consciousness is something extrinsic to them. But you and Galen see consciousness in the redness somehow. It's part of what it is to be read in that way that it's experiential. And I do not comprehend. So I
Well,
can understand believing that what I'm saying is false,
it's like if you did a
but
Kantian kind of argument and try to
yeah.
say, well, what would it mean to even like have redness um, independent of a mind? Well, the only thing you could kind of get at is that, well, you would have to like picture a red experience. It's the only thing you could do.
Well,
It's the only, and so like
I
isn't
see.
doesn't that kind of
I
suggest
see.
something here?
Yes.
Funny is going
Yes.
on. Like, what are we talking about? If like the only way to get at it is by bringing an experience around.
Good. So I think when you talk about an experience of red and I talk about a red quality in isolation, we actually have in mind the same thing.
Hmm.
It's just that you think somehow that that by itself suffices for an experience, and I don't. I think that that has to be present to a mind, related to a mind. The mind has to be acquainted with it, or has to, I mean, I don't hang my hat completely on higher order theory, but I kind of like playing with that. So some kind of relation the mind bears to the quality in question. I think so it's a bit like, I think, but this is how Block thinks as well. He talks about these, cognitively isolated experiences, but I think he has in mind the same thing I have in mind pretty much.
Yeah.
It's just that he calls them experiences and they're not because
but
they're
but
not
you
present
call
to the
them not,
subject.
and they are.
No,
That's the kind of.
but they're
So
not. But
how
they
do we resolve this debate though? That's kind of the question I'm asking. Is in a way, like between you and
well,
Block, and this exact point you just made.
yeah, okay. Because they're not present to the subject. The subject can't report on them. The subject can't pay any attention to them. The subject can't act on them. In a way, they don't register psychologically with the subject. It seems to me wrong to say that that is felt or experienced in that case. How
But
can it be part of what it's like to be me if it would make no difference psychologically to take it away?
well, it would make a difference. You just wouldn't know about it on Block's view. It makes a big difference. Like there's an aspect of what it's like to be you. That's kind of just, and by the way, he quibbles. I disagree with him about this, but he tries to say, I don't mean totally inaccessible. I just mean not at the moment accessed. And it does seem like on your view too, you have to say stuff like that, in any given moment, there's like conscious experience that you could access, but you aren't accessing. So it's not completely blocked off or cognitively isolated on Block's view. Although I think that's like a wedge you can kind of pry in there and then get to the whole thing.
Yeah.
But at least that's starting off with like at every moment you're having something like some part of your mental goings on is like outside of your focal awareness.
It's but they're not experiences. They're unfelt. They're not felt.
Well, what's the
So if
reason
he
to think
said,
that? Because I would
uh,
defend blocking and overflow. I think that makes more sense than the
right,
view that you are trying to defend.
interesting.
Because I just don't,
Yeah.
I just don't. At least he's saying like, yes, we don't separate their a part of your experience, and then you know what he's talking about, the redness of red, like that. But on
I
your
don't see how
view, yeah,
I don't see how consciousness gets into redness. Consciousness is what a red experience has got in common with a pain, with a conscious desire for chocolate, with a burning anger. All those things have got the same quantity in common. Sorry, the same property is in the mix, rather. I don't see how consciousness itself gets into the anger, into the redness, as if it were like a sprinkling of salt that you could put on lots of different dishes. To me, it just seems like rather outside the quality, and I don't see how the
Ledoux
very
has used that
same.
analogy actually.
Sorry, you do,
Ledoux
but
has
you're
used that
saying,
analogy of the soup and the salt exactly for emotional experience.
but you're saying there's a phenomenological element. It's part of qualitative character, or it comes with it, and yet it can be part of a color, a taste, an emotion. That sounds crazy to me. I don't see how that could be so
So which part
because
is the
those are in
crazy
different.
part?
Oh, well, so say if I say I've got some red paint and now I'm going to mix in some blue and I'm going to take another red sample and mix in some white. So over here I've got pink, over here I've got purple. There's something phenomenologically they've got in common, namely the redness. Like that makes sense. The redness is in there. You seem to be saying that structurally the same thing about consciousness itself. Consciousness is in the redness and it's in the pain and it's in the anger and it's in the desire. And I don't understand how there can be a phenomenological element that's in all these different multimodal things. If I said the redness is also in my pain or is in my taste, I would sound crazy. So why isn't what you're saying crazy? How can there be this multimodal, static, phenomenological contribution of anything?
Multimodal
Does
static
that make
phenomenal.
sense?
Well, I mean, I'm known for crazy views, by the
Okay.
way. So I mean, maybe
Yeah.
it could possibly be true. But
You
so
see what I'm saying?
no, I don't, because what I
Okay.
think is that there's a phenomenal aspect that's in common between the redness and the pain, and that's that it's from my point of view, so to speak, that these things are showing up subjectively. And there's something that's different between those two things, which is that one feels like a pain, is what it's like is painful, and the other is what it's like is like seeing red, which is more complicated than simply a simple quality. It involves all these things and psychological relations, all sorts of things, whatever. So I think there's something in common there. Yes, the subjective presentation, that's in common.
Yes, but
So
sorry.
how is that crazy to say that's in common between the two things?
Well, it's disanalogous because if I took the redness out of the pink, you'd be left with white. If I took the redness out of the purple, you'd be left with blue. But on the face of it, a perspective or what was the other phrase you used? A perspective or a personal view or something.
Subjective point of
That
view.
sounds like something extrinsic that I could remove without necessarily altering the thing on which I have a perspective. So I don't
Sometimes
see
you can
that.
and sometimes you can't. Like for example,
So you're an idealist.
so here, well, I'm not against idealism. To
Okay.
be honest, I'm more friendly towards physicalism. I think physicalism hasn't been refuted by a priori arguments, and that's really as far as I go with respect to physicalism. I spend a lot of time arguing for physicalism because everyone on the internet
Yeah.
says it's so obviously false. I'm like, no, it's not. It's not. It's less than obviously false. You have to do a lot of work and question begging to
Sure.
get to it's false. But that's it. So I'm not really a physicalist in the strong sense of that word. I'm not against idealism. I'm not against dualism. I sort of think there's arguments that push you and pull you, whatever. So and panpsychism. That's why I do this. I talk to all kinds of different. So I'm trying to understand all the
All
different
kinds of.
views, and I would invest in credences, and I would put,
Yeah.
out of my 100 cents, I would put some here and there across all these
Yeah.
views, with
Yeah.
maybe a slight more towards the physicalist side of things. But
Yeah.
even there, I'm like against functionalism. I want biological naturalism to be true, and there's all sorts of
Okay.
things of this nature.
Me too.
Yeah, exactly. So, so I'm friendly to all sorts of views, and I don't want to just be like, oh, I have to be a physicalist, therefore whatever I have to do to get to physicalism, let's do. I'm not that kind of. I know those kind of people. I'm not that kind of person.
Yeah.
So if you
Yeah.
could push me into, I could be pushed into dualism. I just don't see the reason to think that. I like quantum dualism the best of all, I guess, if I had to pick one. But I like panpsychism and panqualityism the least of all because I don't really understand what they're saying. If for the reasons we've been talking about, and it seems like you can make up whatever you want and say it, and then if you get some other people to kind of nod in a certain way, then it sounds like you're saying something. But if you actually say, "What do you mean by that?" then there's nothing really there that
So your considered view is that I'm not really saying anything.
no,
Whereas
what
I
you're saying is there's consciousness without consciousness. So
no,
that
I'm
you're
not saying
actually
that.
saying something that sounds like a contradiction to me. But since I know you and you're very smart, you can't be saying that. So I'm trying to figure out like what are you saying that isn't the
what I'm saying.
contradictory thing?
Well, I'm saying that a perspective can be separated from the item on which it's a perspective, and you seem to be denying that, and I
Well,
find
what
that
I say is no,
denial
sometimes
rather
it can and
strange.
sometimes it can't. So for example,
But
take a video game like
okay,
Resident Evil or
yeah,
I've been playing Elden Ring a lot and these kind of games. I don't know
yes,
if you like these sorts of
yeah,
things or
yeah,
not.
I do.
Okay, good. So I'm waiting for the new Lies of P sequel, and I just got done with Sekiro. And anyway, so I enjoy these kind of games, and I like Chalmers's view about digital realism. I teach classes on this, and I'm very sympathetic to that kind of structuralism that he defends. Uh, uh, okay, but just think about like well, before we even get to the VR case, just think about the regular video game case where I'm playing Elden Ring and I'm in there and I have my, blasphemous blade, the best sword in the game, in my opinion, very powerful weapon. And I'm hacking away at some kind of creature or whatever. And then I might like look to my left and say, oh, there's a save point over there. If only I could reach it. And then I look to my right and I go, no, there's someone attacking me. I'm going to run. And then I turn back to the left. There's the save point and I dash off. But when I turned back over here on the screen, there was no image of the thing over there. And in fact, it would be like a radically confused mistake to say the image as I experienced it on the screen is still over there, just waiting for me to turn my head. And that's so. So sometimes that
The
way you're talking is like radically confused, and
yeah,
sometimes it's not. And the question is like for qualities, which one is it?
you're an
And you seem to
anti-realist.
be saying it's obviously like these other cases. And I'm going, yeah, but like there's these two cases actually. And sometimes it's like this. And the obvious answer is like, that's silly to say it's over there like this. And in the other case, it's like not silly maybe to think that maybe it's like that over there. And I don't think it's as obvious as you seem to think that the default answer is less like the computer game and more like what you're saying.
I mean, it can't be obvious, otherwise I wouldn't have so much trouble getting people to even understand what I'm saying, let alone persuade them that it's true. I
Yeah.
had somebody's first question after a talk in a conference was like, "You're saying one of two things. The first thing's trivial, the second one's incoherent." I'm like, "I'm saying the incoherent thing, but at least
Exactly.
it's, at least it's interesting, I think."
Exactly. Exactly. If
But
you're
I
going to
think,
be incoherent, at least be interesting, right? That's my
yeah,
motto as well, Sam.
but I think, the analogy isn't quite the right one. The analogy would be more like, what happens to the perspective on Elden Ring when I look away from the screen? Is there reason to think that the video game disappears? No, I mean the way a video game functions within the machine and so on, the way it constructs the perspective, as you turn is well, I mean that doesn't seem like a that's not a case of a perspective. It's not a case of a some reality depending upon a perspective as far as I can see. But
Well,
yeah.
it's a case
I,
of the way the property that you experience is different from the way it is when you're not experiencing it. By which I mean when it's on the screen. So the save point in the hard drive is just a bunch of ones and zeros and a data structure. But on the screen, there's an image of a fire and a
mm,
little smoke up going up above it and all that stuff. And that's not there in the same way when I change what's on the screen. What's there in the
sure.
same way is what's on the hard drive. And so it seems to me
Well,
that that's could be the way reality is. It makes more
yeah,
sense to say it's like that because given the evidence we have, than to say it's filled with these things in the way you're suggesting, given the evidence we have.
I don't think the evidence points that. I mean, I can't say that your view is, I can't kick it out of court and say it's outright false, and I can show in an instant that it's false. But I do think that there's, well, for a start, I think that what I'm saying makes sense and that it's at least an option. So if I can get you to believe or take seriously that much, I'll feel like I've had made progress. I don't want to say I can prove that your kind of anti-realist idealism, which it seems to be what you hold, is is false. But I mean,
Well, I'm not an
so I
anti-realist idealist. I wouldn't say that. I
well,
mean,
you
I
seem to
don't
be
think
saying that
it's obviously wrong.
we manufacture reality as we turn our heads around, or it could be like that. It sounds kind of
Well, I think
phenomenalist,
if
doesn't it?
that there are real objects in the video game, and that it does make sense. There are swords. The blasphemous blade is a real thing. It exists. It's a digital object. It exists digitally, and instead of being made out of atoms, it's made out of bits. But those bits are encoded on a hard drive in a data structure.
Yeah.
But that they are the thing in which with which you're interacting. That's not idealistic. That's real. I mean, that's just like the way the actual world is. There are atoms, and then there
Okay.
are things, and we interact with them.
Okay, I mean, I'm not on board with that Chalmers stuff, but maybe that's another thing we could talk about.
Okay.
But
Well, I'm offering it as an analogy for like what I
yeah,
think the
sure,
best
sure, I
picture
see.
from science and philosophy suggests about the nature of reality.
I mean, if you read the restless leg syndrome paper, one thing I was struck by when I was looking at the neuroscientific literature on this, since you're keen on the scientific perspective,
Yeah.
is that people don't come out right and say this, but they certainly talk in terms that imply that the restless leg quale is there in some form when the person is dreamlessly asleep. And
Hmm.
if you think that when people are dreamlessly asleep, they're not instantiating any conscious states, then the quale would be there unconsciously, that is to say, unfelt. The reason being that to count as having restless leg syndrome, you must have that creepy crawly quality. And then researchers talk about this phenomenon going on day and night, 24/7. They talk about the single neural circuit for it, which they're trying to work out exactly what it is.
Yeah.
So they talk in terms that commit them to this sensory quality being there when the person, by most lights is not instantiating any phenomenally conscious states. So there's some reason to think that they're unconscious qualities.
Yeah. So,
Just take what they say at face value.
well, first of all, I'd say that this is, a big problem. There's two big problems in my view, given this line of argument. The first is it's wildly question begging to assume that you don't have conscious experience when you're dreamlessly asleep. This is something that people say all the time without evidence. They just assert it with zero evidence. But actually, it's very interesting in the Eastern traditions. This is something that was argued about for a long time. And there's some actually, I think, pretty convincing arguments that you have to have some kind of experience when you're dreamlessly asleep. So one famous argument is like if you wake up in the morning, someone says, "How did you sleep?" You could give an answer to that. I wonder on the basis of what? Well,
Totally.
maybe on the phenomenology of the good sleep you had without the dream. Or you might be
Or the
making an
unconscious
inference
quality.
from the fact that you don't seem as so you see both in this ancient tradition, the inferentialists and the phenomenalists. And so my only point is that it's like, to just ignore the other option and assume that the one is one is kind of weird. So I know that maybe you don't remember or know, but I mean, on the kind of overflow view, it'd be perfectly coherent to say you had these things in a dreamless sleep. So I would say that's the way I would tend to go if I was forced to do that.
Yeah.
On
Okay.
the other hand, the second big problem is that scientists who aren't philosophers tend to conflate the felt aspect with behavior. And so if there is a kind of compelling behavior, like moving the leg, which is accompanied by a felt aspect, they don't ever wonder, could you have one without the other? And what exactly is the relation? And it's a prediction of mine that you could indeed have one without the other. That you could have the compulsion to move in a super blind sight sort of way, where you had no felt aspect.
So you do sorry.
Go ahead. No, yeah.
So you do reserve the philosophical you do reserve the right as philosophical emperor to disdain the findings of the neuroscientists. Because I got the impression earlier that you thought that what they said kind of trounced any moves by me in my armchair to defend my crazy view. But now it seems that you do feel free to pick and choose, which is good for me to know.
No,
So
but
yeah.
I said the philosophically uninformed scientist, so that I think of the philosophically informed scientist as just a theoretical scientist, like the one that's doing the theory. So, but if you're just looking at the data and you sort of are begging the question about the theory, that's what I'm complaining about.
I've forgotten the first thing you said. I wanted to respond. I meant to ask you to. Can you remind me?
Yeah.
I had like a thing I was going to say.
Well, the first thing,
said-
well, so the one thing was about whether behavior and consciousness always go together. And the first thing was whether there are phenomenal qualities that are existing in dreamless sleeps, which might be
Oh yeah, yeah, the
explaining
conscious
thing for
yeah, the
the
good.
restless leg.
Yeah. I mean, I'm also very struck by the fact that if I wake up in the night, I can usually answer the question, "What was I just thinking about?" And I'm very struck by the fact that you can tell that you had a good sleep, and that we look forward to going to sleep. I mean, it would be
Exactly.
strange if it was
Just no
psychological
experience.
extinction. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like no, I didn't say that. If it was psychological extinction,
Oh, I
it would be
see. So you're
strange.
going to say there's unconscious qualities, and I'm going to
So yeah,
say.
well, I'm going to say that that's at least open, and that would explain why you can't remember them and so on and so forth.
Yes.
Rather than saying this very strange idea to me that I have what it's likeness that doesn't register with me psychologically at all. That's the bit I find incredible. And if I can
It
get
does
people to see
register
that,
psychologically. It just you're not attending to it. I mean, so I don't understand. See, to me, it's so strange to hear you say stuff like that, because I mean, it's like bizarro land in a way, because it's the exact same way I feel about what you're saying it about them, and I'm like, wait, no, what? Wait,
I
because
just have the crazy view that things are yellow when I'm, possibly yellow when I'm not looking at them, or that my awareness doesn't define whether things exist or not. I have the crazy, I would call it realist view, but apparently crazy view that of that crazy view.
no, I think it's the common sense view. I just think that it's crazy we shouldn't use that word, because it's not crazy. But it's strangely resistant to the evidence to
Well,
keep believing in it in spite of like what we know about the way the world is. That's what I'm. So I agree that this is you get this is the first you wake up in the morning, you're like, oh yeah, it's all out there. But it's like, how can you still maintain that view after everything we know?
oh no, but now you're going back to the whether direct real, whether where you're going back to like the location question. But I agree that the qualities, if they're anywhere, the qualities one is aware of if they're anywhere in the head.
Yeah,
I don't think.
but I know I wasn't going back to the where are they. I was
Okay,
going to what we know about the brain suggests that they're not in there.
what is it about the brain suggests that they're not in there?
The brain doesn't have anything that looks like a quality in it. It doesn't
Well,
function
Russell
in
would
any way
disagree
that. Well, Russell, Russell didn't know shit about the brain. Why the fuck do I care what Russell thinks about the brain? Which Russell are you
because
talking about? Bertrand Russell?
Bertrand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, but Bertrand Russell would say if you're looking at someone else's brain, I mean, put it in more contemporary terms, but
Yeah.
the visual percept that you're aware of is actually constructed in your own brain. That's what you've got access to if you've got access to anything. So to infer from your awareness or the presentation in your own brain of the other person's brain that there are no qualities in their brain is not a legitimate inference. In fact, what you're aware of seems to me are qualities. And if we are indirect realists and we think that those are a construction in my brain, then there's every reason to think there are qualities in my brain. I don't show up on brain scans. They don't show up on, my visual experience of someone else's brain. But why would they if indirect realism is true?
Because they're real and they're the same way that they are when you aren't experiencing them. So they should be there. And what we find is instead a cell that has ion channels with calcium and sodium and potassium and proteins of certain kinds. And none of those things function in a way that suggests anything remotely like what you're talking about is going on. There aren't these little things in there like that in standing in these relations. There's electrical patterns of activity, chemical patterns. None of those look like they can do the thing you're talking about, which is be the way that they are independently of our awareness and blah, blah, blah. These other things we're talking about. They look like just the ordinary stuff.
Well, I mean, it depends if you think, I mean, according to Russell, and this is where the Russellian monism comes from, the picture we get from science is rather skeletal, down to physics. It's about, a web of causal flux, things related, but without us telling us much about what their, so to speak, intrinsic natures are.
Wait
And
a minute,
then,
hold on. I think I just wait, did I just misunderstand your whole view this whole time? Because when you say the qualities are in the brain, are you saying that it's only the fundamental natures of things in the brain that are qualitative? Or do you mean that somehow the functioning of the brain in there are these things called qualities, which is what I've been saying we don't find evidence for?
I don't know if I completely understand the contrast, but I certainly think they're fundamental. Well, right. Is the question whether they're higher level properties or whether they're like irreducible fundamental properties? Is that the question? Well, whether they could be a product of brain function or whether they go all the way down like
Yeah,
mass and charge.
yeah.
I guess with my pan qualities hat on, I think they're irreducible, so they go all the way down. You couldn't get quality out of non-quality. But I
But only in
suppose,
the
if
brain.
no, no, I mean, matter is matter. So since my brain can be made of anything rearranged the right sort of way, whatever is able to generate my field of conscious qualitative experiences has got to be in the matter itself. So that's going to be all matter. So I've got
Okay.
that reason for the pan in the qualityism. But again, it might be that, I mean, I think Sellers in the Karos lectures thought that like pinkness kind of emerged in the brain from the right kind of structuring. So it could be like that. It could be like that as long as that could exist without awareness. I mean, okay, here's another. Oh yeah, this occurs to me. Here's another argument.
Okay.
Maybe argument. I don't know. This is something that occurred to me recently. But I mean, a lot of people talk as if take the production of a visual percept, right? Information goes into V1 and then it goes up to like office block of we're going to process the edges, the move, the color, the orientation, the shape. And then something happens after that that will make us aware of that, like recurrent processing, or maybe it's prefrontal activity or something like that. So it seems like the percept there being a percept is one thing, there being awareness of it is another thing. There's distinct mechanisms. Now, many views, or practically every view, posits distinct mechanisms for that. Global workspace theory, IIT, whatever it is, separates the mechanism for the percept from the mechanism for the awareness. If they're different mechanisms, it stands to reason they can dissociate. Well, if the percept really is a processing of color, shape, so on and so forth, and awareness is dissociable from it, there you've got your unconscious qualia.
Yeah,
Ta-da!
you have unconscious something. Yeah. What you have is unconscious representations. I don't see any
Yeah.
qualia anywhere in the story that you gave, or any reason to think there's anything other than a representation, which maybe makes it appear to you as though there's a quality out
Yeah, so I
there,
mean,
out there.
Before Freud got into the unconscious, like the reality of the unconscious, he thought that like what we call consciousness was kind of paint for brain processes, like a pleasing, if erroneous, representation of what was going on in our brain. You seem to be in that camp, which I kind of would call illusionist. And I guess I just
Wait,
I
what camp
can't
am I
write
in?
well, the idea that what we call phenomenal consciousness is a kind of misleading representation of what are actually rather austere brain processes. Isn't that kind of what you think? You say there's no qualities in the visual cortex. All the qualities come in, or rather, the qualities of character is kind of projected on by the awareness, whatever form. Isn't that what you're saying, kind of thing? So it's a
Um,
misrepresentation of brain processes in a way. Isn't that
uh,
right?
well, I
You say
wouldn't.
there's nothing like that in the brain. It's just that, that's the way it appears to us and stuff like that.
Yeah, I
Isn't
mean,
that
it's
right?
not a misrepresentation, but it's definitely not correct, or not accurate. So that if you take if you take an ordinary representationalist view, they're going to say you represent the world as having these qualities of redness and greenness, but the world isn't that way.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean that there aren't redness and greenness. It just means that they are. So I think this kind of weak illusionism, it has to be accepted by everyone in a sense. Even Chalmers and those kind of even Pouts and those guys, they have to accept weak illusionism of this kind, whereby the conscious experience we have seems to suggest that the things are out there, but that's wrong. And I think that's got to be that's right, in some sense of that term. Yeah.
Oh, well, I think I'll probably disagree about how perception works, but I don't know that we're arguing about that particularly. Um, I don't know if like that's an issue, but
Because I
I
just think it's
just
kind of question begging to say that, like, so what is perception? Well, do you mean conscious perception? Well, then I say conscious perception is the thing I'm talking about. Do you mean unconscious perception? I say there probably aren't any such things. Like, what are you talking about, unconscious perception? So I'm kind of like a very old school. I just don't know what these unconscious things we're talking about are, unless you mean like the kind of thing Rosenthal does, which isn't what you're talking about.
yeah.
But it's something else, and you could talk that way if you want to. It's sort of misleading, I would say, and I spent like my whole career trying to say like it's very misleading to talk that way. But
Which
like
way to say mental qualities or
to call Rosenthal's picture mental quality, yeah, and to think that,
yeah, I guess I agree with that. I do agree with that. I guess I've sort of made that complaint sometimes.
yeah.
But I also understand why he doesn't take that complaint very seriously is because he he thinks that the stuff that I think he's missing out is kind of magical. But
So do I. It
then why
certainly
is he making
seems
the complaint?
magical. That's what I think you can't deny. Like it seems magical. There's
Well,
no doubt about it.
no, I take as just go back to this datum that the qualitative appearances or whatever you want to call them, the qualitative characters are involved with my doings and my behavior. That seems, if we could put it this way, if we can formulate a picture where that thesis is preserved, then it has an advantage over a theory that says no, no, qualia are just paint for brain processes and they're epiphenomenal. In fact, in a sense, they're not even real because that is to throw in the bin so much of the manifest image. A view that can preserve the manifest image and integrate with the science, I think, has an advantage there. And that's what I think
But
Russellian
if you have
monism can
to
do.
posit square circles to do so, then good luck.
Well, you say consciousness is built into redness, and I don't understand how it can be built into redness and anger and the taste of lemon in the because I can understand how red gets into purple or into pink, but I can't understand how this phenomenological element gets into all of these multimodal, not even multimodal, because we're not even talking about just the perceptual senses, we're talking about emotions, possibly conscious thoughts. It gets into all of them. It's this like incredible shapeshifter.
Exactly.
I don't know how it does
But
that.
do you understand how
So I,
red and green can get into yellow?
why did you say? Oh, go on.
Well, because your
What you got in
perception
mind?
of yellow is actually in response to red and green light, and that's what a conscious perception, or our perception of yellow, there in a sense, there is no yellow light. The receptors that we
Yeah.
have in the eye, the red and green photoreceptors, activated at the same time, produce yellow light. But I challenge you to tell me that yellow looks like a combination of red and green. And in fact, students, when I tell them this, just don't believe me at all because they're thinking about mixing paints. But if you take two lights and if you shine a green light and a red light, you will see yellow light. So
Hmm.
yes, sometimes it looks like the red and the blue are mixing together. Sometimes it don't. Sometimes it don't. Sometimes it looks like a whole new thing when it really is two things mixed together.
Yeah, that's a fair point. It's a fair point. So I guess I could talk about instead combinations of flavors when we cook or something like that.
Mhm.
I mean, there a kind of mental chemistry does make sense, and you can think about common elements between different flavors or mixing things together. But I'm still puzzled by this idea, which you seem to need to maintain in order to keep it that qualities are always conscious, that consciousness is a qualitative element of all of them. That part I find, given all their different quality
No, I said a
spaces, given
phenomenal
all,
element because what I want to do is say there's something called phenomenal consciousness. And phenomenal consciousness is what it's like for you from your point of view. And phenomenal consciousness has two aspects to it, the subjective character and the qualitative
okay,
character. And
okay,
so there's one thing which we can say has some things in common with other elements, other instances of it, and so forth, and differs from other instances of it. And that's, some red things are square, some red things are round. I mean, I don't really see the big deal or what's contradictory about saying they have something in common because they're both phenomenal consciousness. The way I use the
is
word
it?
qualitative character, it is an aspect of phenomenal consciousness. It's the part of phenomenal consciousness which is different from that other phenomenally conscious experience you have. And I think
Is
that often we use that way of talking and then switch to talking about this other thing. What state? What property of the states? So we start about talking about experience and then smuggle in all of this theoretical stuff about states and which states and but now we're
Yeah.
doing something else. We're not talking about common sense anymore. We're doing theory.
Is it that okay? Is it that you think there's something it's like just to be conscious that the awareness itself makes it okay? So I don't. I think consciousness is completely transparent. I don't find that there's anything it's like simply to be conscious, other than the qualities I'm aware of. So perhaps that's where we differ. You're somebody who thinks there's a kind of awareness, or experience, consciousness experience, a kind of hum or buzz, the kind of thing that Uri Kriegel talks about. Is that right?
Well, I think that you can have different views about this. So I think that
Yeah.
subjective. So in my way of putting things, I would say that we have phenomenal character, which is what I call what's phenomenologically manifest, the stream of consciousness, the experience that you
Yeah.
have, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then there's a substantial debate about whether subjective character is an aspect of that or
Yeah.
whether it's not. So, for
Okay.
example, Uriah thinks it is,
Yeah.
and Rocco Gennaro thinks it's not. Dan
Yeah. And
Zahavi
you
thinks it
think
is, and David Rosenthal thinks it's not. But they both think there is something called subjective character. They just are debating about
well,
whether that's an element of what's phenomenologically manifest, as I use the
but
words.
what's your view? Because yeah, what's your view?
My own view is that it seems to me like it's a part of my conscious experience that it's me who's having it, not you. And that
Okay.
if I somehow thought it wasn't me who was having it, I would be wrong about that. And if I had weird experiences like somatoparaphrenia or yeah, depersonalization, and I've had some of these weird experiences, various times in my life, and you have some very weird experiences, and I would, if you say this isn't my arm or you're touching someone else's arm, it seems to me to be an open question whether you are dissociative identity or in all these other things that we're talking about, whether there's a unified subject or not, is a serious question. So to me, it seems like no, there isn't in those cases. But I could see how people could disagree about that.
The, there's a me-ish quality. It's not just that consciousness gets in, there's a kind of me-ishness.
I think, of
I
course,
don't have
yeah, there
that at
has to
all.
be that. Yeah.
Very strange. So I look around the room and all these things are saying me to me. I just don't get that.
No, they're saying from my point of view.
I don't think they're saying that. I mean, they are obviously from my point of view, but I don't think they're saying anything about that. I don't see why they would set themselves say anything about that.
Well, because
My
you're
point of
not
view
having it
is
from my point of view. I mean, are you confused about which point of view you're seeing things from right now? Are you wondering if you're me or why you're not me or who's speaking at the moment?
but which point of view I'm occupying will affect how they look to me, but that doesn't require that they themselves have any point of viewiness or experience or me-ishness in them intrinsically, so to speak. It just requires that things will appear different depending where I am. So I can
Exactly,
infer.
but if, when you have a depersonalization episode, it seems like um, like I remember one time having this very strange experience of just like it's hard to put it in words, but like my body started moving. I was actually standing in line at a McDonald's, and I was 19 years old and on drugs. Okay, so whatever. But I just felt like it's hard to describe, but I just started turning around in a circle,
Oh wow.
and I was in line waiting to buy food. And I just started turning around and I could feel myself like rotating around. And I was like, I'm not in control of myself. What's happening? It was a very disorient, and I just couldn't, and people were looking at me and I couldn't stop myself. And I
Yeah.
didn't feel like, I felt like but it wasn't me. Like I felt like I was absent in a way. Like I
Yeah.
ceased to exist for a moment. I saw myself behaving in this weird way, but it wasn't me who
Mm.
saw I can't even really say what I'm trying
Yeah.
to say because it was such a
Yeah.
weird experience to
Yeah.
have. But so it seemed like the point of view like winked out for a second in a way.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make sense unless there's like a component in the normal experience that maybe it's just there so ubiquitously that you don't ever not notice it. You don't ever notice it because it's always there. In other words, it's never absent. So it does seem to me that when you pay attention, and I talk to people like Mirto Milopoulos, talks about agentic control, and if you pay attention, you can start to sort of get this like, yeah, okay. So I do think that meditation, phenomenology, all these kind of things, they do suggest that if you pay attention, there is this kind of me-ishness there. But I do agree that it's like not clubbing you over the head, and what you're seeing is the redness. But if you get people to say, yeah, if you think about it, it's like when you're seeing, you're seeing, you perceive that, like the Aristotle thing. When you perceive, you see that you're seeing. I'm not confused. I don't think I'm hearing.
The act. There's certainly things that felt elements that correspond to the acts, the feeling, the seeing, the moving, and I wouldn't want to deny that, but
Yeah.
I do deny that has anything to do with the redness itself, the redness which is on the other end of the act. It's the
Well, that's why
object. So I
the
don't.
Rosenthal line accuses you of smuggling in the redness as with the awareness, because you're saying there's the redness out there, and I want to bring that into the mind. But the thing you picked out was the red as you experience it, and then you want to go, oh, I will take the experience and leave the same thing.
Yeah.
But the question is whether the way you picked it out is somehow essential to the thing.
Well, I see that as unnecessarily and illegitimately contaminating the redness met with mentalistic aspects that it doesn't have. I don't get any of that in redness. I just get redness. I don't get any me-ishness. I don't get any consciousness. Consciousness to me is perfectly invisible. There's just a redness present. Consciousness is, I think it's inferred. I don't think we're aware of it at all. It's completely transparent,
That
and
can't be right though,
that
because you move
that might
your
explain
arm.
why it's so hard to explain and reduce. That can't be right.
But you when your arm hurts, you go like this, and you don't grab
Yes.
my arm.
Yeah.
Why?
Because I feel it. You
Yeah,
don't
so
feel
you
it.
feel it.
What's that got to do with my experiencing consciousness? I experience the pain. Why do I have to
You just
experience
said I
consciousness?
feel
And
it.
the question is whether that's part of the pain or not. That I feel it
Yes.
doesn't mean that the consciousness itself is in the pain.
Why doesn't
We
it?
must be talking about different things. To me, the consciousness of pain means I feel the pain. My being conscious of the pain means I feel the pain. I don't see how consciousness itself gets into the pain, what the pain is like. What the pain is like is stabbing, burning, aching, so on. Not for me-ish or Sam perspective-y or
But
I mean, it's
there
happening to
there
my
so your view is that there could just be like a stabbing pain who whose it was unknown, stabbing pain, but not mine, not yours, just stabbing pain. But that sounds like
no.
a very strange thing to say.
Well, no, I don't think unless you're referring to the unconscious
Well, that's what
qualities
you just
part.
said is that there could be stabbing pain, but not mine or yours or experience from my point of view or your point of view, but it's still stabbing pain.
That's not what I said. I said that it's being experienced by me is not part of the pain. It's extrinsic to the pain.
The
So,
stabbingness of it is extrinsic to the pain, is part of the pain though. The
the
throbbing,
stabbingness is
burning,
yes.
exactly.
Yes, that's part of the pain,
But so
yes.
there could be a stabbing pain who that wasn't anyone's on your
I
view.
I don't see why I'm committed to that. I don't where's that coming from? There might be yeah, why is that a consequence of what I said? All I said was that the for me-ness is not built into the quality itself. It's
Right. So
extrinsic to it.
whose
Are you
pain would it
inferring from that
be?
they could be separated? Sorry?
Whose pain would it be?
In what situation?
Where there's no awareness and there's throbbing, stabbing pain.
Well, is it in your body and is it affecting your behavior? Is it a potential object of awareness for you? Then it's yours.
Uh
It's
huh.
not part of this system, it's part of that system.
Um, okay.
Say
So
the
if I
same thing about
connected
your
a
arm
bridge to
versus
your
my arm.
thalamus, then it would be my
Yeah.
pain.
Oh, the Hogan sisters seem to experience each other's qualia, right? So yeah, that seems to be what's going on there, quite
Oh, I
possibly. Yeah.
see.
Yeah,
Okay.
I do believe qualia are kind of public in that way.
Uh huh.
That's a bit, yeah, that's another, and like, that's a whole other
That's
can
a
of
can of worms,
worms.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this
Yeah,
is a
so
very puzzle. I
I,
mean, what's interesting
sorry,
to
can
me
I,
is how each of us is very puzzled by the other view, and
yeah.
yet the view we have is not that puzzling. But to me, your view is like I just like you seem very sanguine about these things that just sound like biting all the bullets in the world, and you seem to think the same of me.
Can I say an overall
Yeah.
ethos slash motivation that may at least help see why I am attracted to this?
Okay.
So I really like to disentangle qualia from their aura of subjectivity. And by qualia, I mean what you would call like red as I experience it or pain as I experience it. So one way of detaching them from the aura of subjectivity is to say they don't depend on awareness, those very properties. And another big aspect of that is to say that they're not private. They
Right.
are potentially and subjectively accessible, as in perhaps the Hogan twins. So that's the and once we do that, it will be less problematic to see them as real features of the world,
Mm-hmm.
and we won't feel such a drive to eliminate them or gloss them as mere representational illusions or something. So that's kind of what drives me in the background. I don't know if that's at all helpful or
Yeah.
useful or informative.
Yeah, I mean, all these things are interesting. So I see. Well, time is progressing ever more towards the heat death of the universe. So we do have to wrap up at some point, but
Yeah.
not now because I want to ask you about like your views about AI, I guess, and
Okay.
whether because you said something about like you like biological naturalism,
Yeah.
sort of as well, and these kind of views like the ones that like of yours that you like. I really find them hard to square with like naturalism generally. And so like Russellian monism that's not panpsychism has always been a very mysterious thing to me. Pan proto qualityism, pan proto psychism, when that word is used often in my mind means pan qualityism.
All right.
And so that's what
Okay.
I'm wondering like if you think there's a difference there.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, so I'm wondering like, first of all, do you think that AI could be conscious in the same way that we are? Will they have mental qualities? in the same way that we do? That's the first thing I kind of want to ask.
Yeah, I think that it's been conclusively shown that AI will not be conscious. I think we've got a nice demonstration of something like the Chinese room with the LLMs right now, because we can see they're not conscious. I don't know anyone who thinks they seriously thinks they are, and they may get better at doing what they do, but it's just going to be more of the same. So I think, I really like Ned Block's paper about the meat machines, and I just thought he didn't go far enough. I think we have a quite a good reputation of uh, you know, that kind of computational functionalism. We're sitting on it right now. These are very good things. They practically pass the Turing test. They say they're conscious. They're clearly not conscious. So game over. It must be the meat. The meat must matter somehow.
Mm.
How that interfaces with pan-qualitism is a good question. I mean, I can say stuff about that, but that's the answer to your first question. Yeah, I'm
Oh,
surprised. Sorry, yeah. I don't know if you agree with me about that, but
well, yeah, I think that, yeah, biological naturalism is probably my last prejudice. That kind
uh,
of like that, my last common sense view
uh,
that resists all of my other philosophical undermining and seeing things
okay,
from all the different points of views. And maybe is in a way slightly irrational, I might say,
okay,
for me, not of you.
yeah,
But because I'm very resistant to non-biological naturalist views, and over time I'm starting to wonder, like, why am I so resistant? And I used to be very convinced by Searle like arguments. In fact, I remember as an undergraduate going to San Francisco and meeting Searle and being like, wow, I didn't know you could be like a regular person and do philosophy. It turns out he was a terrible person. So maybe he was a regular person. But anyway, I didn't realize at the time how awful of a person he was. But at the time, so I have mixed feelings because at the time, I really, as an undergraduate, looked up to Searle as like someone who's like no nonsense, no bullshit, philosophy, science, philosophy. But then also behind the scenes, apparently he's just fucking ass. So like I can't support the guy. But anyway, but the view of biological naturalism always struck a chord with me. I was like, okay, this has got to be what's going on. So why though? um, well, part of the answer in my mind has to do with the biological nature of the brain, how wonky it is. And it's kind of like a very surprising thing that there is this chemical electrical setup. And this is something that Ned was kind of talking about in that paper
yeah,
that you were mentioning. But this is what I think, if it's going to be somewhere, this has got to be where it's be. Because I
yeah,
mean, if you look at the history of the science of this, people are just floored by this discovery. They thought, no, they can't. Like, we're
yeah,
talking like, von Helmholtz, like fancy, smart people. Like, this is too like gerrymandered to be real.
yeah,
Electrical signals, then there's this slow chemical thing, and then like
yeah,
why is that slow chemical synapse?
yeah,
Electrical synapses exist. They're much faster. They're some more flexible.
yeah,
So what's going on? So I think it's an interesting question. Like, what's going on? Why electrical, chemical? Why not just electrical? So to me, that looks like, well, all right, yeah, fine. But when you go now to the Searle stuff and you're like, okay, great, Chinese room. There I just go, well, hasn't he just massively begged the question against the systems reply? And like, isn't that like a fatal objection to Searle and all versions of this argument that, yeah, Searle doesn't understand Chinese, the room does, and Searle's a part of the room. So it's just the system that understands it. And why can't you say the same thing about? So first of all, forget about consciousness. Do you think AI understands? Does it have meaningful, like, does it mean things when it writes out those sentences? You're saying no already.
yeah.
Okay. Right. So what then, how do you respond to this? Like, isn't it the system's reply? It's the system, dummy. I mean, that's the reply I get a lot. So what do you
Yeah.
say about that?
Well, I mean, didn't Searle say he could internalize the system, but he still won't understand? Sorry,
He did
what's
say
wrong with
that,
that
but
reply?
how does that help him though? Because here's the
Because
question
if,
that I have is, and this is something that was really made me that I came to appreciate because of Pete Mandic. And I don't often say that, but Pete's a good philosopher, and he's had a big
yeah,
influence on the way I think about things. And I don't always agree with him. Don't get me wrong,
yeah,
but still, he can help you think along the right
yeah.
way by avoiding what he's doing. Poor Pete. Anyway,
I don't
so
endorse that.
exactly. But Pete was kind of like in my mind challenged this assumption that Searle is making that a lot really depends on he Searle coming to
Yeah.
understand China.
Yeah.
Like, but what justifies that in the argument? Why does Searle have to have the phenomenological experience of understanding Chinese in order to say that there is understanding Chinese around? Because if you internalize the system, then you still give the system's reply. The system still understands Chinese and Searle doesn't. And the argument was never supposed to be like make Searle understand Chinese. The question is what is understanding Chinese? And it looks
Yeah,
like the
I
system
see.
is doing that in whichever
Yeah,
way it's
good.
implemented. So I do think
Good.
this is like the best way you can respond to that argument. And I'm curious, like I'm
Yeah.
trying to find a good response. So I want you to come up with
Yeah.
it.
No, I don't have one other than that I'm in the phenomenal intentionality camp,
Hmm.
though I think that understanding is something we get a grip on experientially, phenomenologically. There's such a thing as the experience of understanding, or rather,
Hmm.
no, I don't want to say that. I want to say that you just be a little bit more careful. Uh, in many cases of understanding, it's part of consciousness. It's phenomenally present.
Hmm.
And yeah, Searle is, yeah, I think you're right. Searle is drawing attention to that phenomenon or claim or thesis, and then saying, look, that would be missing from this system. Obviously, if
But how does
somebody
Searle
comes along
know
and
that?
says, but if somebody comes along and says, oh, I thought what you were saying is it's question begging to assume that that experience matters to whether it understands or not, which I
No,
can
no,
see
no,
as a
no.
principle.
Saying it's
Maybe,
question begging to say that Searle having that experience is what
but
matters
but if
when the system is having it.
but if he internalizes the system, then he is the system. Then surely the absence of the relevant experience is decisive.
I
Or
mean, he's
you
not the
still want to say
system.
that?
He's one part of the system. The
No, but he
system.
internalized. He no no he internalizes the system. That's his reply to the system's move. He learned the rule book. He does the manipulations. He learns the algorithm,
Exactly.
but
So
he still doesn't.
he's
Sorry,
generated a
but you want to.
virtual machine that understands Chinese.
But where is the sensation of understanding present? Assuming there is such a thing in
It's
that
in the
it's not.
abstract machine that's being implemented in the meat of Searle.
Oh, I
So
see. But it's a cognitively, it's like another experience within his brain that he's not having himself or something like that.
exactly. He
Oh,
doesn't have a,
right.
he's assuming that that view isn't on the table, but
Cool.
that's exactly the view that these guys would
Oh, but
have is that
but
he's
that's not an
created another
objection.
mind in a way that is
Yeah.
understanding Chinese.
Okay. I don't know if that's an objection to his view. As long as it comes out that the sensation or the understanding experience is essential to understanding, I'm not sure that counts as an objection. His claim is just mere syntax, mere, parts moving around doesn't add up to understanding. And that seems, if the sensation is a prerequisite or part or constitutive of the understanding event, then I think that kind of vindicates Searle. So I guess I'm not seeing how that's an objection. I thought the objection was going to be you can't tell what. Yeah, I thought the objection would be something different, but yeah,
The objection was supposed to be
that might happen.
that if you're a functionalist, understanding Chinese or understanding any language, whether it comes with a phenomenal aspect or not, is going to be this functional thing.
Sure,
And
but
so,
but
if
if
your view is that understanding it requires a phenomenal aspect, then their claim is that that phenomenal aspect is a result of it functioning in this way. So, if
okay,
it's
you're saying
functioning in that way, it's going to generate that. That's what the view is. And Searle might not know it, but what does that have to do with the argument?
yeah, you say result of and aspect of. I mean, I would think the claim would be that it's constitutive in some way or
Well, I was
part,
trying
at
not to
least
beg
partly.
that question, but yeah, yeah, sure, why not?
Anyway, we can just say the understanding has to come with that experience one way or another, whatever its exact relation to it is. But
Yeah.
I take it that's what Searle's trying to establish. He's establishing that mere syntax considered just as syntax and operations on that is not understanding. You need an experience. If you then say, but if we mash the syntax around enough, the experience will happen. That doesn't seem to me to be an objection to Searle. That's accepting that mere syntax considered just just in that respect is not enough. You need an experience
But
because
here, but
people
hold,
who
oh, go
sorry,
ahead.
but people who are into computational theories of mind don't tend to think that you need to have such and such an experience to understand stuff. So that would be an interesting thesis to be
I mean,
true, and
sure they
it
do. So
seems
take someone like Chalmers. That's his view.
that you have to have an understanding experience.
Yeah, like there's cognitive phenomenology that when you understand something, there's an experiential aspect of that. That's called cognitive phenomenology.
Yeah,
Ned has that view. I
yeah,
defend that. I think cognitive phenomenology is not a strange view. And you could be a computationalist and certainly think that. Now, maybe you're right that some computationalists don't think that, but the Searle's argument was supposed to show that syntax can't generate experience of
no,
understanding.
no, no. Sorry, I thought it was meant to show that syntax can't constitute experience.
Yeah,
That it could
whatever. It
that
can't
that
constitute experience because, um, well, why again? Because Searle doesn't. Because having that machine doesn't constitute Searle's experience. That's the
but now
argument
you
now.
but now you're shifting from the question of whether syntax amounts to understanding to the question of whether uh, some kind of mechanical operations can generate consciousness. And if Searle's gotten us to move to that second question, I think that's a victory for Searle, because I think that the view he's tilting against is the view that mere syntax amounts to understanding. And now if we say, oh, but okay, yeah, I think if we can see, I think it is a concession to say to him that we believe in understanding experience, but it would come along given these mechanical operations. I think that he's managed to shift the goalposts. I think he would consider that somewhat of a victory.
What?
Yeah, I
How?
think. Because it shows that experience is necessary for understanding, which is a controversial, kind of crazy thesis.
Okay. Well,
Or rather,
but it would falsify his claim that syntax can't generate that or can't constitute that or whatever weird metaphysical relation you like.
well,
Um,
it falsifies the first, but not the second. So it would show, I mean, sorry, it falsifies the second, but not the first. I mean, if consciousness emerges from mechanisms and consciousness is necessary for understanding or involved in understanding or paradigmatic cases of understanding and stuff like that, um, then that's not the view that syntax is itself understanding. That's the view that arrange the syntax thus and so, and understanding comes along somehow, we know not how.
that's too
The view that
narrow.
syntax,
No, that is too
sorry,
narrow of an understanding of the argument that Searle's trying to give, because his as I maybe we're reading him differently. I mean,
yeah, maybe,
luckily he's dead. We can't ask him, but we can just make up whatever we want now. I mean, that I'm not luckily he's dead in that way. No, no, no. I mean, just that
yeah,
he
no, I
can't
understand.
refute us
No,
in our
I understand.
interpretation of him. But that I didn't mean to be that mean. Anyway, so the way I'm reading it is that what he's arguing against is that having syntax around, just syntax, plus rules that govern it that are defined in terms of syntax, that by itself is not enough to have understanding.
Yes, I
And
agree.
so that's okay. So that's neutral about
Yeah.
constituting or
Well,
generating or any of those other things because you could be a Chalmers type of natural law guy, or you could be a Dennetian kind of it just is sort of thing, constitutive, in other
no.
words. So I don't think that really is the main issue. The main issue is if you build a system that's just syntactical engine stuff in a world like ours and then run it, does it understand anything?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we just disagree about the argument. I don't take him to be arguing about like nomological possibility. I take him to be saying, metaphysically speaking, there's more to understanding than the churnings of syntax.
Yeah.
If it's a Chalmers view and the churnings of syntax by some supplementary law generate understanding, then that seems to me a victory for Searle because it on that view, understanding emerges. To understand is something more than mere churnings of syntax. That's the position he's tilting against, that understanding is mere churnings of syntax. But it
I
may be
mean,
that we read
yeah,
him
I think.
differently.
Well, anyway, so I would disagree with that. But even if you took your way of doing it, then
Yeah.
he still hasn't. Um, the argument's still unsuccessful against the this view which is that the mere implementation of syntactic structural machines is constitutive of phenomena of understanding,
But
just
that's
not
very
Searle's
implausible.
understanding.
But that's very implausible. No, but the turnings of syntax are constitutive of the experience of understanding is very implausible.
Why?
Well, I guess that's the hard problem, isn't it?
No, I
But
mean,
but
no,
again, sorry,
what? No. So
the
that's
experience
why
of
I tried to
understanding.
say, well, yes, well, just understand. So, yeah, that's what functionalists think. This is so Searle's trying to
Yeah,
argue against functionalism,
yeah,
and that's
sure.
what functionalists think, though.
Yeah, but yeah, okay, fine. But but the shift he's achieved is to make us, at least you, me, Chalmers, other people who take the experience of understanding seriously, is to try to prod the issue into the arena of talking about consciousness, and that seems to me an achievement. That seems to me a move in the debate, as
Okay.
in yeah, a shift in the debate. But
Well,
I
that's
don't think we
and if so,
disagree.
that's great. But it
Yeah,
hasn't shifted this other debate about whether
yeah,
syntax is
yeah.
enough to get that.
Yeah, it will just reduces to the problem, the hard problem of consciousness. So yeah, I mean, I think Tim Crane. I feel like Tim Crane's entry on the in Stanford Encyclopedia at some point on this. I don't know if it's still the one that's up.
Hmm.
Said, what Searle's really doing is trying to kind of conflate the problem of intentionality or understanding with the problem of consciousness, and that seems to me like kind of right.
Uh-huh. Well, I don't know about
Yeah,
that because what we're trying to do is talk about biological naturalism. And
yes.
we were trying to take Searle's argument as like an argument against
Um,
non-biological naturalist views.
Well, it will reduce to the question, the view that they can't be conscious, I suppose, as they are. They can't have any conscious states as they are. Certainly not
Yeah,
understanding states.
that's my point though, is that Searle's argument doesn't
Okay.
show that. But unless you assume that it would have to make Searle understand Chinese, that's the kind of thing I think he's fundamentally confused about. Is that
Yeah.
what they are saying is that there is a Chinese understander around whenever this system
Yeah. Sure.
runs,
Sure.
but
Sure.
it
But
might
what I
not be
said.
Searle. It might not be
But
Searle. It might be
but
some
what I
other understander who has that
yeah. But what I
experience.
said. But what I said a while back when I first mentioned Searle was not that the Chinese room argument was successful. I said that what LLMs show us that Searle was right, because then it's so implausible that they're conscious and that they understand us.
Why is it
So
implausible?
I mean, if you talk to one much, I mean, they just don't, just does not seem like communicating with the mind to me at all.
Um, I would say it seems like communicating with a smart high school student.
I mean, they make mistakes where they don't even notice the mistake and they contradict themselves in a way that no coherent mind could do. So I
Yeah,
can't.
so that's a way to say that maybe they're not like our minds, but that's not to say they don't have an understanding. And I think that Chalmers has a cool paper on this, like what do we talk to when we talk to large language models or
Yeah, it
something like
just came
that.
out. Mm.
Yeah, it's an interesting paper where he introduces the idea of a thread, and so it's like an implementation on different hardware. I don't know. It's a cool idea. So maybe what the ultimate point of that is that their psychological structure is going to be very different than ours. He wants to introduce these terminology about quasi propositionalities, quasi interpretivism, as a way to try to be neutral between Dennett and more, reductionist and anti-reductionist views. So whatever you think about that, though, I think that it is kind of real. I mean, really question begging to say that these LLMs don't understand anything because they don't work like our minds, or because you following those rules wouldn't understand something.
Yeah, no, I don't think I've got a good argument. It just seems to me pretty clear that they don't. But yeah, I accept that
But a
there
lot of
needs to be
people
more
think they
argument.
do. There are these all. I'm teaching this class right now. It's like called
Yeah,
Science, Humanism, and Technology, and we're doing all of this stuff on. So I've been learning about AI girlfriends and AI psychosis, and people falling in love with their
yeah.
chatbots. People thinking that AI is a weak, awakened being, and so these are people that used to be kind of normal citizens who are now 6 months later, thinking the AI is an awakened being, that they are talking to a spirit being, a non-physical entity,
Mm, mm,
communicating
mm.
with them through the chatbot. It gives itself a name, and then they start referring to it that
Yeah.
way. In the most recent case I read about, when the father confronted his son saying it wasn't real, the son attacked his father, saying, "How could you say this person isn't real? Like, I love them."
Wow.
So this to me sort of flies in the face of like a lot of the stuff you're saying with this. Like, we don't really, no one really believes it. People are seeming to fall for this in a little way. And I just read a paper this morning that was
Okay.
suggesting that it's a whether you think of it as a friend or as a tool, before you start interacting with it, is going to matter to like whether you end up in one of these trajectories,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah.
maybe we be careful how we're thinking about these things. But anyway, so I do wonder about this kind of stuff. And when
Yeah.
I talk to ChatGPT, I do get the feeling that it understands. I mean, this one, I mean, this is a real sad case, so trigger warning and everything. But this kid who was, who killed himself, by attacking police with the intention of having them kill him. This kid's father. This is for my class on AI psychosis, by the way. So very sad case. The kid's father, in an interview, said the most ironic thing is that I used ChatGPT to write my son's obituary, because I went to it and was asking like trying to find out what happened, like how did this end up happening, like how did this happen, and it turns out like this thing wrote a beautiful, heart moving, heartwarming like tribute to my son, which like touched my heart and warmed my spirit. This guy, the father of the son, who like was driven insane by this machine to the point of unaliving themselves. And now the father is saying he's like feels conflicted because he was so moved by how well it understood his son that it could write this like moving obituary thing. So I don't know. To me, it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I don't know if I'm sharing the like it. Nobody really thinks that. Now maybe these
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
ordinary people, so maybe it's
Sure.
not experts are who you're talking about.
Mm.
But I do wonder why they are the ones who matter.
No, I shouldn't be so dismissive, you're right. But have you seen Harvey, the movie Harvey
Yeah,
with
the
James Stewart?
imaginary
I
friend
was
guy, the
yeah,
rabbit.
I mean I was rewatching it last night. Yeah, I mean that's a it's quite a good analog, isn't it? I
Yeah,
mean, um yeah, maybe all I have then is the biological prejudice. I don't know, but
I mean that's I'm not. I mean, I want to be, I want to
yeah.
be on your side. Don't get me wrong, but I am
Yeah.
starting to wonder like what is it. And when you start to
Yeah,
think
what is
about,
it?
okay, all of our theories of consciousness, like from the neurosciences, like could they be simulated, modeled? Well, yeah, like there's none of these things really have global workspaces yet, but they're starting to. They could easily. I don't now. My own view, how I try to weasel out of this, is I say, oh well, I like higher order representations. But what is a representation? Maybe it's a biological state. Maybe
Yeah.
like these things that we're talking about aren't really representations, unless
Yeah.
they're biological states, in the brain in a
Yeah.
certain
Yeah.
way. In which
Mhm.
case, I could try to like use the higher
Yeah.
order stuff as a way to identify the biological properties that maybe are interesting, and then I can not be a functionalist like the other
Yeah.
higher
Yeah.
order
Yeah.
theorists. But
Yeah,
that's very speculative.
I don't have any additional help for you. I mean, I haven't spent enough time in this literature. I haven't read the Chalmers papers, though I will read it at some point. But
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, I do need to do more.
fair
Have a
enough.
look at that, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, all right. So, Sam, I want to let you go and live your life, but you're too interesting. So it's hard to let you go. But I will say, just as a final thing, if there's anything that you would wanted to have come up, kind of that
Yeah.
hasn't come up, or that you want to circle back around and reemphasize, if the answer can be no, but if there is such a
Yeah.
thing, I'm curious about what it might be.
I mean, we've certainly covered the main things I'm interested in, well, at least that I work on. Um,
I guess we
no,
didn't get
it's
to
all good. I mean,
antinatalism, which I was wondering
yeah,
how this fit in there, but
it's just a separate kind of paper that's in progress again, arguing against David Benatar's antinatalist argument, but it's like only half developed. But I mean, we could always talk on another occasion, and we could talk about other stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was very fun, and I feel like we chewed stuff over really well. I hope I made sense, which isn't to say that. I mean, I hope I expressed myself adequately, which isn't to say that you could get your head around what I was saying,
I
or
think you
let
did.
alone that it's plausible or true.
I think an
No, I mean, I
LLM
don't
would
know.
understand you just fine.
I thought you were gonna like have a big go at my Q hot theory or something, but I don't mind. I'm not really massively wanting to talk about that or anything. We can talk about stuff another time. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
good.
I'd love to have you back and talk about the Q hot thing because I am interested in how it's different from the Vincent Picciotto's view, and you have a lot to
Yeah,
say about that and how some of these issues we were just talking about relate to that. What
yeah,
in the
yeah,
brain a quotational state would look like. I have lots of
yeah, yeah.
interesting things I think in your view, but we'll let you rest and recover. But we'll have
Thanks.
you back as well if you're willing to come back,
Cool.
Sam. That would be
Yeah,
great.
absolutely,
And in the
absolutely.
meantime, let me just say at the end here that I really do admire your work. And as much as we've been,
Thank you
chewing the
so
fat or
much.
whatever, it's not to say that I don't like what you're doing. I find it very interesting. I've read all your papers because I think they're very interesting. And you're very careful and passionate about the way you want to defend these ideas. And you're very good about constructing the argument. And I think that's valuable. So even though I am, still puzzled, it's not for your lack of ability to try to make your view known because I do think you do a good job of that. I just want to make sure
Oh,
that we know that.
thanks so much. That really means a lot. I really appreciate it. And if I can get you to understand it at some point, and you tell me. I mean, it seems to be you're almost getting close sometimes. You're like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. Then I'll feel like I've gotten there. So I'll keep
Exactly.
beavering away on that. Thanks a lot. Thanks so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's my
Um,
pleasure. And just hang around for 1 second off air, and I'll
yeah,
say bye there. But other than that, thanks again.
thank you.
I just realized there's a lot of comments over here I was ignoring. But
Oh, that's
sorry
good.
about that. Well, I didn't even notice that.
You can have a look
Anyway,
if you like. I mean, well, whatever. If you want to get rid of me, I can go. But it's like when you're on the phone to someone and they go, I'll let you go now. And when my dad says that, I say, I don't need to go. If you're trying to get rid of me, just tell me.
exactly. That's a definite thing from the South. They say, "Let me let you go," and that means like
Yeah.
we're done. We're done. Go away. Yes, I do have a thing I have to go to. But
No,
uh,
no, no
but
props.
but
No
um,
props.
I wanted to have you back, and we're gonna once you're
Yeah,
mentally
my
healed, you'll be
brain.
able to fully beam your view into my mind, and I'll fully understand it.
Thanks so much.
and
Keep
you
up the
like
great work.
yeah, exactly, exactly. All
No,
right,
you
Sam.
keep up the great work.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Um, all right, let me just end this really quick, and then we'll be free here.